Call the meeting to order. This is the August 22, 2017 meeting of the Town Plan and Zoning Commission of the Town of Fairfield. First item on the agenda is meeting minutes from August 8, 2017. Does everybody have a copy of that? Can I have a motion? Motion to approve by Commissioner Kennelly. Second by Commissioner Noonan. Am I on here?
Sir, I think I'm finding in a second. I think doesn't it say Commissioner Corcoran wasn't here? Was here at noon down there? It doesn't indicate that he was here.
Which item are you referring to? Yeah, and which item in the minutes? So she's identifying the 527 Tunxus Hill Road motion.
Oh, we can hear him, but she's...
And
yeah,
Commissioner Corcoran, right, 527 Tunxus Hill Road.
It probably was someone else. Okay. Thanks.
Right.
Is that mic on, Mick? Okay.
Thank you.
I
So,
don't think it was before.
do we have your notes from the last meeting? Do we know who that is? It's 527 Tunxus Hill Road. Okay. Well, in order to move the minutes, we need to have the correction. So
What does it say?
we'll have to go to
I don't have them
tape.
in front of me.
So this is 527
Yep.
Tunxus Hill Road.
Yep.
And Commissioner Alessi moved the
Right.
item to approve. I'm sorry, to deny without prejudice, and the minutes state that it was
Okay.
seconded by Mr.
All right,
Corcoran.
right.
and he
We'll have
wasn't
those.
here.
We have those notes. I just can't tell you right now
Right.
who that was. But
So we'll
right.
either have the notes or go back to the tape
Mhm.
in order to get the correct name. So in light of that, then perhaps you want to withdraw your motion, Commissioner Kennelly, and move to table it, and we'll just deal with it next meeting.
Yeah, I'll withdraw. And we can table them to the next meeting.
Okay. So the motion to approve has been withdrawn, and Commissioner Kennelly has now moved to table the item.
Yeah.
And Commissioner Noonan?
Second, yes.
Seconded by Commissioner Noonan. Okay? So the motion now is to table the item so that we can get the correct second on 527 Tunxus Hill Road. Any other comments on the minutes or the motion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the motion to table is unanimous. Next item is new applications to recommend a public hearing. 256 Spruce Street, zone change application of Michael Chanella, trustee, to establish a design commercial district on land presently zoned Residence B.
Mr. Chairman, this is an application you've seen twice before, most recently in July of 2016. There is a companion application to this, which is the next item on the agenda. There's an actual proposal to utilize some of the parking spaces that would be generated from the zone change request. So it is a proposal for zone change, and then there's a companion application, so it does require a public hearing.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to move to public hearing, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. You did McAleese. Okay. So yeah, we'll do that in a second. Well, let's finish this item first, and then we can go there. So motion to move to public hearing on 2A by Commissioner Kennelly. Second. Second by Commissioner Noonan. Okay. Public hearing is required. Question? Commissioner
Question
Brown.
for staff. I guess it's required because it's over
Right, the commission has the discretion not to hear the same application for zone change for a period of 12 months.
Right.
It's been beyond 12 months.
You just in your initial assessment of Mr. Went of this application, is it appreciably different than the one we heard in July 16th, or is it?
The zone change?
Yeah.
Is identical.
It's identical?
Yes.
And the compliance application for the parking, is that a little different?
It's different. They're proposing the same layout of parking, but there's a proposal for one of the adjacent restaurants to do an outside patio that will occupy some existing spaces.
Okay.
So it will bring that plan into conformity.
Okay, I'm just trying to get a feel for what it is they were proposing this time.
Yep.
The zone change piece is identical, but there's a user that's looking to take up some of those spaces.
Okay.
And because it's more than 12 months since the last, they have a right to file the application, and we have an obligation to hold a public hearing.
Correct.
Very good. Any other questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, the item is moved to public hearing unanimously. Next is 2B, 256 Spruce Street, zoning compliance application of Michael Chanella, trustee for expanded off-street parking and for a seasonal outdoor dining area in the design commercial district.
Again, the companion application, just to be clear, this item is discretionary on your part whether or not to have a hearing on a zoning compliance, but since it's paired with the zone change application, it seems to make sense to hear them together.
Okay, thank you. Can I have a motion?
Motion to move to public hearing, Mr. Chairman.
Motion by Commissioner Kennelly,
Second.
second by Commissioner Noonan. We just heard the explanation on this. Any other questions for staff? Any comments? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? It's moved to public hearing unanimously. I'll entertain a motion. We got the information on the seconder for the minutes from August 8th. I think first now we need a motion to add the item back to the agenda. Is that right, Mr. Went?
I think you can just make a motion to go back to that item. I don't
Make
think
a
it's already
motion,
on the
okay.
agenda. I think you can just,
Make a motion to go back and approve?
I'll make a motion to go back to 1A on the under executive session, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and approve the minutes with replacing Commissioner McAleese for Mr. Corcoran in 527 Tungus Hill Road?
If that can be done in the same motion, yeah, sure.
Yep, so let's do it as one. All right? Can I have a second? Second by Commissioner Noonan. All right. Thank you, Commissioner Francis. Any other comments or questions on this? Okay. All in favor of returning to the item and approving with the one amendment, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, those minutes are adopted as corrected unanimously. Next is old business, 3A, zoning regulation amendment, application of Post Road Residential LLC to amend section 10 of the zoning regulation. I would, before we get to that, its companion is 3B, and before Mr. Went starts to describe it, this was tabled from last time. We have a couple of commissioners who I know are very interested in the application. Commissioner Alessi's not here tonight, and Commissioner McAleese. There's still issues that I'm working through in the application. It's very significant, and I would entertain a motion to treat 3A and B together, and then a motion to table 3A and B. Our deadline to resolve those is the end of September, so we have plenty of time.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chairman, to table 3A and B.
Okay. Motion by Commissioner Kennelly, table 3A and B.
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Barretts. Any other comments or questions on that? Okay, hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, 3A and B are tabled unanimously. Next is 2031 Reading Road, re-subdivision of Allen Gill for 2 lots in a AAA zone.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, this was heard on the 8th, our last meeting. This essentially is the same application that was approved by this commission on October 25th, 2016. So it's for 2 lots in a AAA zone. At that time, there were 3 substantive conditions of approval that were pursuant to Section 2.3.8 of the subdivision regulations. A fee equal to 10% of the market value of the property is required in lieu of open space, and that fee was estimated at $46,800. The payment must be made or a payment agreement filed on the land records prior to recording the final subdivision map. Condition number 2 was there was an existing septic system that had to be relocated prior to establishing the new lot line. And number 3 was any work in the right-of-way, including street trees, requires a permit from the town tree warden. The reason this is before you again, or was before you again, is they did not record the map within the requisite time period, although they did demonstrate through the as-built septic system plan that the owner has relocated that septic system. So what was condition number 2 was no longer necessary. But I would recommend that the other conditions be identical to what they were before, and it's the same plan. It was approved by this commission in October. Nothing's changed other than moving the septic system, so we'd recommend its approval.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve 3C.
Motion to approve 3C by Commissioner Kennelly. And I was remiss earlier. Commissioner Grauer is sitting for Commissioner McAleese, and Commissioner Ford is sitting for Commissioner Alessi. And you've both been participating and voted on the earlier items as such, but I just want to make it clear for the record that is what's happening. Do we need conditions on that motion?
Well,
I would recommend the conditions that were adopted previously, with the exception of the septic system conditions, no longer necessary.
You want to get a second and then, or no? I don't
No,
know. Yes,
because then you'll just have to amend the motion.
Okay, well, in that case, yeah, I would move then that we approve 3C with the conditions 1 and 3, with condition 2 was the septic?
Correct.
Right, okay. So
Yep.
that's the motion.
Good, thank you. Can I have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Noonan.
It was described by staff and presented to us at last meeting. The issue related to the septic system has been addressed. It's been moved. The other 2 items make sense, are in process. So I would say we should go ahead and approve this. It meets all of the other requirements, and we're acting in our administrative capacity and are limited in what we can do in a subdivision application.
Thank you. Commissioner Noonan, any comment?
Nothing to add.
No, very good. Yeah, I agree with your comments and the recommendation of staff. Anyone else have any other comments? Okay. The motion is to approve with the conditions. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, the motion passes unanimously. Next is compliances. 900 Richard White Way, coastal site plan application of the town of Fairfield pertaining to a proposed screening berm at the Public Works aggregate storage and processing yard in the floodplain district.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, joining me at the table is Joe Michelangelo, the Director of Public Works, who is also an ex officio member of this commission. I'm going to give you a quick background on the coastal site plan reviews in general, and a little bit about this project, and Joe is going to take it from there to kind of outline what this proposal is all about and answer any questions that you might have. So you've seen many coastal site plan applications. Most of the time it's in conjunction with the residential development, but the Coastal Management Act is codified as Section 22A-90 of the Connecticut General Statutes. In those statutes describe the requirements of the municipal coastal program. That act also defines coastal resources that warrant protection and defines policies for each resource. So when you get a report, which you have seen and you have before you this evening, those reports typically describe the coastal resources on and adjacent to the site, reiterate what the state's policies are, the relevant policies with respect to those resources, and then describe how the project is or is not consistent with those resources. So that's what that report is before you. It was prepared by our town's engineering department. We did forward this plan up to the State Office of Long Island Soil Programs, and late this afternoon, got some comments that Mr. Michelangelo is prepared to address with respect to how that impacts this project. But before he does that, he's just going to walk you through briefly the overview of this project.
Good evening. I'll talk through the project, and I have a couple of large-scale prints, so if it's easier to point to it, certainly will. The proposal before you attempts to accomplish two things. One of the things we had done approximately a year ago in June of 2016, we had a Phase 1 environmental assessment done on this portion of the property. With me tonight is Bob Gabrick, a PELS and licensed environmental professional from Osprey Environmental, and you'll see his name on the plans. He assisted us all through this process. Part of the Phase 1 environmental assessment, which was done in June of 2016, discovered that this part of the Public Works property was historically used as a landfill, probably around the time of the 1960s. So we had known there's another portion, the formerly closed town landfill, which is closer to the Mona Terrace Senior Center, has been known about for years. That's been closed. But this was something that, even though there may have been hunches that it was used for that purpose, this was the first official documentation that we had that put it on record that this was a former landfill that needed to be closed officially. So one of the things this plan does is create a grading plan to cap that landfill. So the idea behind that is you create an impervious surface, and I use the drip coffee filter analysis. If you have your coffee grinds there and you put water in it, you're going to get a brown leachate coming out of it. If you put something on top of it like a saran wrap, well, the water from the sky won't go through your contaminated material, it'll shed off. So this grading plan is designed to do that. We're not taking the contaminated material, which is at depths of 10, 20, 30, 40 feet below surface. We're not removing that, but we're capping it. So we're putting an impervious surface so that when the water comes from the sky, it'll be collected by a drainage system, it'll be retained and ultimately discharged, but it won't go through our contaminated material. So that's the capping part of it, which we sloped, and that's at generally from elevation 34 to 32 to 30. So you want some pitch to get the water to be collected and not stand there and run off. And that gives us a future working surface to conduct public works operations as we've done for years on that part of the property. Also, in conjunction with that, we have a grading.
Question. What kind of material do you use to cap it?
The proposed plan will have a bed of impervious material. So we select material, gradation of material, so that there's more fines and clay. You don't want a coarse gravel type surface that will allow water to penetrate it. So it's more of a clay silty
so
one.
it's something natural.
Well, we are going to have a we are going to have an asphalt cold milled asphalt surface on it. So between the asphalt surface and the layer underneath it, the water will not want to go down. It'll want to shed off at the 2 or 3% grade into our drainage system.
Clay type and then asphalt.
Correct.
Okay.
And also what we have, and that's the landfill capping part of the grading plan. In conjunction with that, there is a construction of a landscape berm. And you can see that at the plan, that's basically a trapezoid shape which rises up from both sides at a 2-to-1 slope. It's topped off at elevation 45 at a flat plateau. There'll be a 10-foot fence with a scrim on top. And the purpose of that is to provide a barrier between the public works operations and our neighbors to the south and the Pine Creek area also. And we worked in conjunction with a landscape architect, Peter Minuti, Professor Peter Minuti from the University of Connecticut. He was down in the fall. We had 2 public meetings where it was almost like a design charrette, where we talked through the design, what some of the issues were with our operations. So that trapezoid, if you notice on the plans, it doesn't hug the existing bank at all. There is a buffer area for the most part. There's one area where the grades didn't allow. So the natural grades will rise from Pine Creek as they do now. We'll have a flat area there, and then the 2-to-1 slope will begin to rise to elevation 45.
What does 2-to-1 mean?
It's 2 horizontal to 1 vertical.
Can I ask a question? I see here we have this letter from an environmental analyst from the Land and Water Resources Division from the Department of Environmental Protection, and in it the letter says the following. We would also suggest modifying the dimensions of the proposed berm as to create a less severe slope than the proposed 2-to-1 slope, and then asks you to provide the details and graphics of the sediment erosion control and maintenance, blah, blah, blah. But this plus the letter from the environmental group from the Sound are both looking at this issue of the 2-to-1 slope. I understand obviously that you have, any project like this is in part has to deal with the concerns of the neighbors. I assume you've read this letter and you've also seen the comments of this other organization that Mr. Reber kind of brought in to look at this. There does seem to be some scientific, and I don't want to again create more red tape for you as you try to create what appears to be a necessary environmental improvement and also an amenity and also deal with neighbor concerns. But with this issue of the 2-to-1 slope, is this something you're going to be working with the state on, and is there a possibility that the severity of the slope will be somewhat lessened to address their concerns about runoff, or can you talk about that?
Yeah, and once again,
And maybe they're mistaken, they haven't looked at the project and don't know. Maybe you can clarify that.
and a 2-to-1 slope is sort of the maximum slope you could use to have a vegetated
Berm,
surface.
right.
And you could you could even mow a 2-to-1 slope with a push lawnmower.
Sure.
You'd get plenty of exercise doing it, but it's a nice steep hill, but
Sure.
it can be done. So anything steeper than 2-to-1 is where you start to use riprap and gabions and things like that. So 2-to-1's the max you can do with natural surfaces.
So I assume there's less cost involved because now you're planting natural stuff as opposed to putting in riprap and stuff,
Well-
which would add to the cost of the project? Or?
Well, if we did go
Right.
to a 2.5-to-1
Right.
or 3-to-1, which can be done, we could alter the grades to do that. One of the things that does is, it increases the bulk of the project. So instead of our 80-foot base, our base would
It's
be
wider.
100 feet.
But the thing is that I'm actually leading you down the wrong road if I did, because it sounds like what they're talking about is not increasing it to 2.5, but going down. They
Right.
don't seem to want it as high because they think that the runoff will be accelerated. I mean, that's what I read, and I'm not an expert like yourself, but I'm trying to understand what the state and the environmental group's concern is and whether we're going to address it.
Now, my take on it was
Right.
to lessen the slope to a less severe, so instead of 2-to-1, my take on it was that if a 2.5-to-1 or a 3-to-1 could be accomplished, that would be more advantageous. And I think we could look at the plans and see if that could be accomplished. One of the things that I say is that, I think it's more critical along the outside of our trapezoid. On the inside, since that's flowing into our capped landfill area. But we could, if that's I think we could satisfy both of those comments by probably tweaking the plans for a less severe slope.
Okay.
So your point is that the slopes don't need to be the same on both sides. Right? On the outside, it can be a more gradual slope, and on the inside, it can be, the 2-to-1 or even more steep. But I didn't see, or I didn't get the notion that they wanted to reduce the overall height. Even though the slope may be changed, it still should rise to a height of 45 nonetheless, correct?
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, they don't mention, you're right, they don't mention anything about 45 degrees, 45 feet. They simply
No.
say we would suggest modifying the dimensions to create a less severe slope than the proposed
Right.
2-to-1. And your point is well taken. You could be at a different on the inside and different on the out.
And I think, can you tell us why 45? I think I know, but can you tell us why 45?
And once again, working with the landscape architect, and this is a lot of it is scale factor, and scale factor from the residential properties where largely the Fairfield Beach Road properties are the closest to us. So And once again, 45 is the elevation with the, you know, once again, it won't be 45 feet high, that's just the above sea level elevation. But from a scale perspective, from the distance of, you know, 800 feet where the houses are, looking at an embankment, we'll have one, so in essence, the natural embankment will be half of that. Then we'll have a flat area because we're not hugging the existing top of slope. And then the other one will be approximately the other half. So so in essence, if you're looking from the Fairfield Beach Road side, you'll see two hillsides, each approximately, you know, 22.5 feet each, which blends into the, you know, the natural terrain there. With the tree growth, this will be below the existing tree growth that's out there today in a lot of spots. There's one open spot there.
Right. And ultimately, that height with the grade, et cetera, will provide screening for what is behind that embankment, which is a capped landfill / excavation dumping ground.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
May I ask another question?
Commissioner Francis.
Further on, these comments are about the sedimentation. The water runoff is only going to be an inch, and they recommend either a second pond or a larger pond because with many of our storms, it doesn't take long to get an inch, and they didn't want it going into Pine Creek. And that Connecticut Fund for the Environment mentioned exactly the same thing. Can we pipe something over to the side, make a second pond, or make this deeper, or something to address those concerns?
Yes, we can. So exactly what you said and what's over there, we can't add a second pond. So the existing pond there will take the first flush, the first inch of rain, and then we could create something where after that there's an overflow, it gets diverted to a secondary.
I know,
spot.
sometimes it's so fast.
Yeah.
Right. So that was another suggestion. Yeah. Mr. Wendt, you're taking a note. Yeah. Okay. Good.
Can I ask him okay. Thanks.
Go ahead.
I just want to, and maybe this is also to Mr. Wendt, because you know we're being asked essentially to approve a coastal site plan application. Here, Ms. Collenberg from the Land and Water Resources Division of State Environmental Protection mentions here, if the town hasn't already done so, they should contact the Remediation Division and Stormwater Management Division to determine what, if any, further review and authorizations are required before proceeding. Has that been done?
Yes, we're working with both of those divisions of
Okay.
Connecticut Deep.
Okay.
And that review for that has not been completed yet, correct?
Correct. We've been working with them, but we don't have final approval from either of those.
Right. Okay.
Can I ask just about that? What does that mean in terms of our decision to approve this particular compliance?
Yeah, so-
that's what I would wonder.
I mean, we're still in executive session, and I would like for, you know, to hear the rest of any material that you have to present and Mr. Wendt to present. But, you know, ultimately, just procedurally, this is on our agenda as a compliance item. So typically with compliance items, you know, we would hear a review, we'd have the materials, we would discuss it in executive session, and we would vote to approve or deny. Another option that we have is to move the item to public hearing. You know, there are neighbors that are interested in this application. We did receive a comment from the the Connecticut Fund for the Environment. I know that I saw a comment from Mr. Reber also in the file. I think that there are certain questions that we have about the plans and the impact of the plans. We've also identified several things that have been recommended that we're hearing from the town are of interest and could be accommodated, which would result in an amended plan. And I think that, you know, one thing we might want to consider doing is reserving, ultimately, whether we approve or deny on what we see in a revised plan that would accommodate some of these different concerns that we heard. So why don't we talk about those issues after we finish with the substance of the presentation and figure out where we want to go with this tonight. Does that sound?
I'd say, the other thing I'd say, Mr. Chairman, is if we are steering towards possibly a public hearing, and I think that's extremely well, I think that's an excellent suggestion on your part. My only thought is that we certainly can hear the remainder of this, but we may want to hear in other words, some of what we're hearing tonight may very well be changed, and I don't want to slow down the process, slow down the town and their excellent efforts on this project. I don't want to waste staff's time on this. My only thought is if we do think it's best to do a public hearing on it, and that there are these issues that are going to be maybe taken up with the state, and there may be amendments or changes to be made, maybe that whole plan should come to us, since the changes they're going to talk about tonight. I don't want to rush through this, but maybe it's better for them just to come back and simply have us table the compliance and have them come back as a public hearing item on the agenda in the near future.
Well,
that's just my thought. I mean, we can go through it, it's fine, but I'm thinking it may be a different presentation after.
Well, I think that at that point, procedurally, if we were to move it to public hearing, then it would be noticed, and the materials would be filed in advance, and they'd be available at town hall for, people to get copies and ask questions and so forth.
No, but I'm just saying that like for example, things like the slope changes or the exterior slope changes or things like that, it may be in other things, the ponds, it may well be a different application than what they're presenting now. So if we hear out this application, which I'm completely willing to do if you and our colleagues want to do that, I'm just thinking in the name of saving time and maybe, if we are going to do probably a public hearing on maybe a somewhat different application, I don't know if hearing them now for what may be different makes much sense tonight. But either way, I'm fine.
Sure. So my immediate reaction to that is what we have done already this evening is identify a couple of things that we're hearing should be fixed or revised, and we may discover some more. So I think it's productive for us to at least hear it out. Commissioner Barrett?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't think it will kill too much time by letting Mr. Michelangelo finish his presentation.
Right.
I just have a question about outside of the letters we received or were forwarded, has there been any other, public interest in this application, people calling or asking questions?
I had, late this afternoon, I did get an inquiry from an RTM member on behalf of some folks down there. So I think there's probably, Joe can speak better to the public input that's happened to date, but I think it would be fair to say that there's probably some public interest in this application.
And I would like to hear about the public outreach and the public participation in the development of the plan.
Before we go there, I just want to try to answer the one question that came up with respect to the other branches of DEEP that ultimately have to pass judgment on this. Those are kind of like parallel path type of applications that have to happen and get reviewed prior to the town moving ahead to implement the plan, but those are kind of independent of the coastal site plan piece of this. So that's kind of like when there are other reviews from the building official and so forth before building permits get issued, that just happens. Those applications or reviews are pending, so this would be a separate matter.
Just make one more point and I'll let him go back. Yeah, just two things just to think about. One is we can move anything to a public hearing. I mean, you could have a sign that you move to a public hearing just because you want to present it. What we do have here, though, is actually, usually when we're doing these applications, we're just discussing it, and Mr. Wentz is when, here we are getting a presentation because the applicant is the town and he can come before us here. So we do have that advantage. So I think we should proceed with that, hear what he has to say, and then decide what to do.
Yep, very good. Thank you. Please continue.
Okay. Just to touch on a couple other aspects of the plan. So what this landscape berm is doing is actually carving out land that the Public Works Department uses for our own purposes, and even the Harvest New England site, to create this barrier area. So in essence, there'll be more area less area that'll be used for an industrial purpose, squeezing our operation in a smaller footprint, and creating more of a buffer between us and our neighbors with that berm. And that is not just along the existing aggregate pile, but that extends into the Harvest New England property too. We currently have a request for proposal out there, so either Harvest New England or a successor will be there, but as part of the new agreement that was issued through an RFP, they have a smaller footprint to utilize. We'll still offer the same service, but it makes everybody sharpen our pencil, both the town on our side and our contractor with the woody debris operations.
And that's not, the details of those relationships are not before us, right?
Yep.
But my question was, are any of these proposed activities going to be conducted on top of the cap that is installed under the plan?
Correct. So the cap will be a area that we will use for public works operations. We use it now, and we'll use it in the future. Once again, for the most part, one of the things we generate through our normal daily activity, through our drainage projects, our road projects, our parking lot projects, street sweeping, catch basin cleanings, beach cleanings, is generate, several thousand yards of material every year that we need a place to process it and work with it. And this has historically been the place, so we need to keep doing that operation. And this operation will be much less intrusive to our neighbors with the landscape berm.
So so help me understand the engineering a little bit then. If we have a site right now with contaminated materials that we're going to put an impervious surface on top of and grade it so that the water is going to sheet off to a drainage system, how is that going to work when we have additional fill and debris and material that's loaded then on top of the cap where people are working and bulldozing and moving things around and doing all that?
There's a right way and a wrong way to do it. So currently we're doing that type operation in another section of our public works yard, and we have the bins of concrete blocks. So right now we're sort of crowded into a different area, but there's an efficient way to do it with different bins, so commonly referred to as Mafia Blocks. You create your bins, and there's only one way out, and you could put the barrier in front of there, so after every work day, you basically move it from one bin to another and sort it. But there is a efficient way to do it. We don't want water to, we don't want siltation to leave the site to enter the drainage system, so the drainage system is designed to collect it, as is the sedimentation pond before it goes to Pine Creek.
So on top of the cap is not going to be another dirt pile?
Correct. The idea is not to keep building it up forever. The idea is to reduce it and minimize it.
Okay. So on top of the cap then, any material is going to be in storage bins and segregated?
Well, correct. It'll be largely, one of the problems that occurred is everything was heaped together, and then you have to filter it out. Well, if you sort of, segregate it when you bring in, you make the challenge a lot easier for yourself.
And where does the segregation occur?
Well, currently it's on a different part of our public works property, so it's, so it's right now we're doing it basically. If you went to the public works property, there's an area behind our salt shed where we have material storage. If you go on Google Earth tonight, you could see the bins, which probably hold 20,000 cubic yards of it. They can't hold 20,000 cubic yards of material. So but once again, that's not the, that's our other work area. Right now, it's being done in an area where we have pipe stored, and we have lifeguard chairs, and we have vehicles being stored. It's literally being done in one of the access driveways on the inside of the property.
Mm-hmm. And so that sorting will be done or not be done on the cap?
It will be done on the cap.
Okay.
Did you say you have boards that show all this? I thought you were capping it, some trees, some grass and trees was going on it. Did I read that wrong? And
Well,
you had a separate aggregate work area.
Yeah, on the landscape berm is the one where it's going to be vegetated,
Okay.
seeded. There's going to be red cedar planted, sassafras planted there, birdhouses. That's on the landscape berm part of it. On the other flat part area is
Is the former landfill.
landfill cap, which is going to be a work area.
Can you talk a little bit about, the public outreach and participation in development of the plan?
I think we had first public meetings with the group were held at Sherman School the early part of 2016. I know we had at least one, possibly two, in I think May and June of 2016. In the fall of 2016, we had two meetings also at Sherman School. Those are the meetings that we had Professor Peter Minuti there from UConn to work on the design charrette with the stick-on pads to work through the design of the landscape berm. So since that time, probably since the first of the year, we have regularly scheduled meetings with the group every 2 months. We have a public meeting every 2 months. Since the fire training grounds have been opened, we're now having the meetings at those locations there. So we set the meetings up, they're scheduled through the rest of the calendar year. Also what we do is every 2 weeks, we issue a update on the status of this property. And there's a whole bunch of other activities there that, with the fire training ground and the water pollution control plant and our dike that's going around the water pollution control plant, there's a sort of confluence of neighborhood issues. So largely it centers on this issue here, the aggregate pile and the berm, but our bi-weekly updates that we sent out addresses a lot of our community issues on the entire property, including this.
Who do you send those updates out to?
We have a mailing list largely of the group that attends the meetings, the Fairfield Peninsula Association, Fairfield Beach Road Association. I think on our distribution list, we're probably up to about 200 subscribers on that list.
200 residents.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Other questions? Do you have any more? Commissioner Grauer?
Joe, I attended some of your meetings at Sherman School. The neighbors were kind of outspoken about the whole thing and upset about the operation that Julian had going there. Jim has pointed out to me that only zoning and zoning board of appeals can approve a coastal site plan. However, you've gotten comments in from Save the Sound, from DEP, I'm sure you've gotten comments from Conservation. I don't see anything here from the neighborhood group, basically the Peninsula Association, which Bill Perugini apparently called on today, or from Flood and Erosion. The letters that you've got question the design of the whole thing. You just mentioned tonight that it could be changed, it could be this. My question to you would be, why hasn't the application for coastal site plan been offered to these other groups for their comments? They can't approve or deny, but they can make comments, and I think it should be a situation with the town being at the top of the pyramid. They should be able to pass the information down to the groups, not the groups constantly going seeking the information, because if they take a nap, they miss it. And I don't think that this board has the in-depth knowledge of the combined total of all these other groups that get involved with it. You've had big turnouts at your Sherman School meetings, and as far as I know, they haven't officially seen the application for a coastal site plan. I think they should be presented with an opportunity to comment on it, and they should come back for a public hearing.
One of the things we did in the bi-weekly meetings, we do include the land use process, that application, that the plans were completed June 21st. The plans are on the website. The CAM application's on there's a PW Yard website. So we've told them where it is. We told them the schedule for all these meetings. This was submitted to Conservation also. There was
Have they gotten copies of the DEP letter and the Save the Sound letter? Have they seen the actual coastal site plan application? Has flood and erosion been alerted of the situation? They're involved with things along the shore, flooding and things?
Well, this isn't a flood control device.
I understand that, but you have a sediment pond to take a 1-inch rain and then drain into Pine Creek.
Yeah. Now, the Connecticut Fund for the Environment, they were enlisted by the Fairfield Beach Peninsula Association, so that's where they were commissioned. That's how their input into this process came about. So they're directly involved with at least a dozen members of the Peninsula Association. So these people use Attorney Looney from the Connecticut Fund for the Environment to do a lot of their legwork for them because they're busy. The letter from Connecticut Deep literally came in 4 o'clock this afternoon. So that hasn't been shared with it. But once again, I think every speck of information that the Public Works Department has is on a website, PW Yard, and it's not hidden on there. We've even told them that this meeting we had a meeting the 8th, so we couldn't be on your agenda for August 8th, but we told them that the August 22nd meeting has been earmarked for probably 6 weeks through those biweekly emails. And I know, the chairman of Flood and Erosion Board is here today. I know he's aware of the CAM application. So.
Okay. And the chairman of the Flood Erosion Control Board is here this evening?
Yeah, Mr. Mahusky.
Okay, so they're aware of it, and you know where the materials are, and if you need copies of anything, we can certainly make those available to you, get those over to you, and we'd certainly be interested in any comments that you might have. Okay, good. All right. Any other comments?
Just one other thing I want to add. You notice that there's elements of the design that the landscape architect included, like birdhouses and the type of plants, and the plantings. One of the things they're intended to do is be a starter, basically a starter, seedling type plants, and then as the volunteer growth, he called it. So whatever wants to grow in that berm area, whatever nature wants it to grow, will eventually flourish and dominate what's planted there. So that's the intent of the planting scheme. And one other thing I wanted to note, at the foot of the trail, at the foot of the berm, you'll notice that there's a trail that wraps all the way around there. It's probably a good 2,000 feet, and as some of the members may know, there's been a master plan years ago through Dr. Frank Rice. So we tried to incorporate elements of his master plan of a trail in this area, in this location.
Right. Excellent. So when you go back and look at some of the other things that we talked about earlier, additional pond and the grade of the berm and such. I saw also a request that the plan include the coastal jurisdiction line, which someone else mentioned is also not on the plan. Yep. Is that missing for a reason, or is that something you can include in a revised plan?
Yeah, we can include in a revised plan, and I think all our the coastal jurisdiction line's 5.2, and the other lines below that. So we're a good in elevation, we're a good 10 to 12 feet above at the minimum.
Right.
In some cases, we're 20 feet above that.
Sure.
That
So if the plan will show that we are well clear of that, that would be a good thing to have on the plan.
Yep.
Right. What about the tidal wetland boundary and coastal resources?
Some of those are shown on the plan, but they can certainly be delineated more carefully.
Okay.
And the tidal wetlands line, as Joe indicated, will be actually waterward of the coastal jurisdiction line. So those shouldn't be a big deal to revise.
Right. Good. Excellent. And then the other thing that DEP was asking for that I also wanted to see was the total distance of the proposed public access walkway in the final plan. That'd be helpful, especially for members of the public who might come to understand the aspects of the plan that are, for their benefit. I mean, I think it's probably the pink elephant in the room that, this is in large part being driven by members of the public who this site, was impacting. And the berm serves function, but the reason we're landscaping it and we're doing all this stuff is to make it pretty, so that the residents and the adjoining landowners are benefit by that. So there's things that we can do in the presentation and on the plan to show that walkway, how it will look, and how long it will be, and so forth. That would be really helpful. Okay. So, unless you have anything further, we should then talk about process and what we want to do with this. It'd be my suggestion that we move this to a public hearing and have a revised plan submitted and mark that up.
I'll move to do so, Mr. Chairman, if you will accept that motion.
Okay, so moved by Commissioner Kennelly and seconded by Commissioner Francis.
Could I?
I'm sorry, Commissioner Kennelly.
I'm sorry, I apologize. I just had one question for Mr. Wendt. Mr. Wendt, because a number of, and frankly, sometimes I'm confused by this, but what is the standard for us to approve a coastal site area management plan? What are the, I mean, I'm rereading carefully. I will not lie. I only skimmed really the last 2 days this report. I'm reading certain things closer from Ms. Pooley.
Sure.
She essentially makes a case, sort of like a geometric theorem or a legal case, where as she makes each point, she says, the proposal is consistent with the policies set forth under general development. Mm-hmm. So what is the standard, if we're going to approve this for the commissioners here, what do we have to establish in order to say we're comfortable? Normally, these things are, as you know, pass pretty swiftly, but in this case, since there's going to be some interest from the public.
The standard is, as I tried to describe before, and we can provide you, if you think it would be beneficial, the full text of the act. But what that act does is define certain coastal resources. The plan itself describes which of those resources are on or adjacent to the site. And the statute also defines a list of policies for each resource. The report that accompanies any coastal site plan application identifies which are the relevant policies and how the project is consistent or inconsistent with those. If there are inconsistencies, that's not necessarily a no, but if there's negative impacts, how are those mitigated or why are they acceptable? That's really the standard. Are there any inconsistencies with the coastal use or resource policies, and if there are, what are the mitigating circumstances to make those acceptable? That's really the
right. And the reason I asked it is because under item 3 in the presentation, the report from Ms. Pooley, under A, general development, she does say, proposal's consistent. But this seems to be sort of the crux of the matter, because in her description about general development, she talks about the site will be improved to provide a definitive berm, a stormwater collection and drainage system, improvements to the vistas by ways of vegetating the earthen berm. Essentially, the very things that the chairman talked about. This is meant to be good for them. So I think we do hash this out in public. Once we sort of get to the point where everyone's comfortable, that is going to be the kind of the crux of.
Sure.
Because as you pointed out earlier, while we have one function to perform. In other words, if there's other things that later DEP wants to deal with or whatever, we don't have to see that as a standard for our approval. We have to deal with essentially these elements under the law.
In the thing, and I know we only received this late today, but I want to point out that the letter we did receive from DEP does not take issue with the project in terms of its inconsistencies with any of those coastal resource policies. They're making some recommendations about some other aspects of the plan, but they don't raise any issues in their view that rise to if they thought that were the case, they would provide us a different letter that says, we don't think this is consistent. And we have received those in the past, that we don't think this plan is consistent with those policies. They didn't do that here, which I think the absence of such a finding, I think, is important to note. But if it's...
I would also add that their policies it's not
Right, I mean, there's a...
necessarily
no,
formulaic.
No, absolutely not, and
Correct.
that's
And
why I
the
think that discussion in the
consideration-
public hearing makes sense, sure.
Exactly, and so the consideration of these issues to, make a determination as to whether the project is consistent
Right.
with the policies and
Yeah.
something that we want to have happen, I think is the task at hand. And if we can improve the plan by making these tweaks and consistent, consistent with the policies, then all the better.
Well, I think that what you, Mr. Chairman, suggested, of course, is really in sync with what Commissioner Grauer said, and that is engaging the public and making sure everyone's clear and understanding it is going to be a terrific thing. I think a presentation that deals with some of these issues that were raised just by the chairman is a very good thing. So hopefully we'll clear that up with a public hearing and it'll have smooth
Okay.
sailing from there.
All right, excellent. So the motion on the table is to move the item to public hearing. Does anyone else have any other comments, questions? All right. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? It's moved to public hearing unanimously. Thank you very much for coming down tonight. We really appreciate your time. So the next item is 1215 Post Road, compliance application of RK Brickwalk 1 LLC for seasonal outdoor dining patio in the Center Design District.
What's coming down the line here is an aerial photo that might help synthesize where we're talking about. In the Brickwalk building, there was recently a coffee shop established, Shearwater. If you look at the photo that you have or will shortly have before you, just to orient you, the building at the bottom is the Lesko Funeral Parlor. The building in the center where the crosshair is where we're talking about. And you can see right where, to the right of where the crosshair is, there is an existing patio that's used by the Milkcraft ice cream store, if you're familiar with that. Then there are 4 parking spaces, and then right on the adjacent wall, the south wall of that building, you can see 3 parallel parking spaces. The proposed...
One of which is empty.
Correct. Where the 2 cars are parked is essentially where this patio is proposed. It's going to occupy those 2 parking spaces adjacent to the covered handicap ramp that goes up. There will be access to it as shown on the plan. So it will take away 2 parking spaces. There is a matrix of parking calculations. The long and the short of it here is this 310 square foot patio drives the demand for 4 additional parking spaces, including the 2 that were eliminated. There was a variance application approved for this earlier this month by the Zoning Board of Appeals, because they felt on balance there's enough parking within the complex as a whole to satisfy that requirement. So that is it is a raised kind of deck. It will be flush with the top of the covered portico there. There's a handicap ramp that ramps up, so it will be raised up off the ground. There are bollards around it as shown. And that is all I have, unless there are any questions.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Wendt or a motion?
So moved.
Motion
Did you say we have to
motion to
move?
approve?
Yes.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Francis,
I'll second.
second by Commissioner Barron. Commissioner Francis?
All right. Now, there is a small deck outside it now.
The deck you can see in that photo was originally established by, there was a bakery
Cupcake.
there that preceded the Milkcraft
Yeah.
store that's now occupied by the ice cream establishment.
Okay. So people can already sit on the deck,
They can.
and they just want to make the deck bigger.
Well,
and take
that's
away
kind of
parking.
adjacent to the other space. The space that the coffee shop is, it would be basically adjacent to those parallel parking spaces. It's 2 storefronts down. So the deck would be on the south-facing
They
wall.
don't have a deck now.
This particular
The
tenant
door
does not.
doesn't. Okay. No, I see where it means. It looks like it's a deck. And they
Right
want
there.
to make it big.
And that right there is the handicap ramp, and That's the opening right there that they're proposing to access it. So the doors to the establishment are it's the last store in the building.
Correct.
And there's a handicap ramp that then goes to the back, around the back. They're proposing to open that wall and build a deck where those two cars are parked right now.
Yeah, if you're going to approve this application, we would recommend the standard conditions that you're well familiar with for our outside dining establishments.
Yeah.
Mr. Webb?
Yep. Commissioner Noonan?
It's going to be built up, this patio, correct?
Correct.
Why, I didn't pick up on this when I was looking it over. Why is this not a compliance and not just going to a public hearing?
Well, it's not again, if you think it's warranted, you obviously have the discretion to go to hearing with it. It's not really considered an addition to the building because it's not enclosed space.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Barretts?
Just wondering why they're only utilizing it from April 15th to October 15th on our standard conditions of
Our
approval,
conditions typically allow April 1 through the end of October.
but they just want to have it just 6 months.
Well, I think they were trying to mirror what I think they.
Those are the old dates. We changed the
right.
dates, and that's the standard conditions of approval would be to add it to our list
Yeah.
for outdoor seasonal dining.
Yeah, our standard
And it
conditions
would-
will allow
it
them a
would
little
run.
bit more window
Yeah.
than what they've actually proposed.
Yeah, I just didn't know if Mr. Fallon or somebody was thinking there was something different about this, or, you know,
No, I
how
don't
it
think there's any-
functions or operates
I
than
don't
our
think there's
other.
any intent to be different than the rest of the.
Unfortunately, I think Mr. Fallon just made an error.
Yeah, yeah. So, and you know, again, the parking lot, Mr. Wen, I think, I think some of the spaces really adjacent to that do tend to fill up quite a bit, that area near the building and Mechanoodle and some things, but there is, I think, ample parking throughout the parking lot, and that would be the argument here that,
Right,
you know,
you can,
people
even
are
if
gonna
you
go
see
far
from
in the
the,
back.
I don't know I can't tell you what the time and the date was of this aerial photo that I downloaded from Google, but typically, there are always, at least at my observation, when I'm there, particularly down near, on the site plan where it's labeled now or formerly Brickwalk Crossing Associates LLC, 49 spaces.
Yeah.
There are generally always empty spaces.
Okay.
At that. Obviously nearer some of the more active medical offices and some of the more, nearer the closer to some of the tenancies, they're obviously more crowded, but I've never encountered a at capacity situation.
No,
Not in that part of the parking lot.
not in that part, but in the front, like near Bright Star LLC. that
Certainly,
fills up
closer
all the
adjacent to the
time.
building, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, so, I
You
mean, they
go-
are,
You go 2 rows back, right here, right here,
Yeah.
here. These rows are never filled.
okay.
I'm in there a lot. I don't think that the parking is so much of a concern. I mean,
No.
there's actually, there's an underground parking garage under this building that I don't think
Right there.
anyone uses. I know I don't. I think I've been down there once. There are spaces down there. I think we just need to consider whether we want these kinds of appurtenance, on existing buildings as a matter of policy. I mean, do we think it's a good idea to be basically letting them build, an extra deck on the side of the building in the parking lot, to have some extra outdoor dining?
Well, the only thing I would say as a matter of policy, Mr. Chairman, in that regard is this. One of the reasons why the density or the intensity of Brick Walk was supported by the commission was the idea that, by its very name, it was meant to be a different kind of design. The original expressed intent for Brick Walk, I think you were on the commission at the time, of course you were, Mr. Barretts, when we were presented with this, I think originally, was that the goal was that there were going to be these efforts to try to bring some of these stores to get their wares to the, outside the store, whether, in the case of this outdoor dining, but also I know for things like the original Trek bicycle store, for example, for a time had a space where there would be a weekend work that you could do, get your bike tuned up and things like that. Some of the other, I think one or two of the market kind of related stores, they were able to kind of display wares and things like that. So as a matter of the goal of kind of what Brickwalk was meant to be, which is while it was clearly a mass of retail, it was meant to be less you drive to it mall and more integrated into the post-road kind of hopefully more walkable environment. So from that perspective, from a policy perspective, you can look at it two ways. One is well, gee, they're extending out to get more patron space, absolutely, but there's a larger kind of a mission, I think, that is valuable there that Brickwalk, which is to try to not simply have people get out of the pod of their car and get into the pod of their store, be outside. So that's one of the reasons I at least at first glance, I think that I would support this.
Very good. Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah, I mean, so from my perspective, the back of this building is, right now, you kind of feel like you're in the back of the building. And nobody wants to park there because, for that reason, I think, and you're not exactly close. The designs look nice. I mean, the deck looks nice. Looks like it'll be well integrated into the building, raised up off the parking lot. That is a good, 4 feet off the ground, right?
Yeah, it's about 3.5 feet, yeah.
Yeah. So, and is it covered?
I don't think so.
No. The ramp is covered, but they're not extending the roof over the pit.
Yeah. Yeah. So, anyway, it's a design element. But given that it's raised, I would support this. What I didn't really think worked terribly well was the old tomato and basil that we approved in the middle of the parking lot, taking away two spaces and having them put a bunch of tables out there. I don't know whether that's been successful or not. It's not a restaurant that I frequent. Oh, actually, I've been to that.
Wasn't it successful enough to keep the restaurant in business?
Yeah. Well, it's now it's a new.
It's closed.
That one's closed now.
It's
Right.
Fundamentally, Blackwell Turnpike struggles with the fact that it is far more 1970s get in your car, get out of your car kind of strip than I think we all hope the post road will be by all the things from architectural design and all the rest.
Yeah.
But I'm not looking at this as something to save the business or help the business. I mean, maybe that is what they wanted. That's why they're spending these funds. I just look at it as what are the things that make the Brickwalk less like just a shopping center downtown, and more like something that's integrated to the
Anyway. So anyway, for those reasons, I would support it as well. Commissioner Barrett?
Yeah, I support it too. I mean, I think one of the really positive things we've done over the last few years is encouragement of outdoor dining, changing our regs to support it, the whole annual process, trying to make it easy to do it. I mean, if there's issues, and again, not everything makes sense, and I agree with the chairman that one at Tomato Basil, where actually it seemed like people were just eating in the parking lot, but for the most part, we have, it's created a more vibrant community in the downtown area wherever we have it. We try to encourage it, and yeah, I mean, people grabbing whatever this coffee place has to order and eating it outside. Again, I think it's a benefit to the customers that patronize the place and in the area. So, as long as it's not something unsightly or that's going to, create a safety hazard. We've seen that where people had to walk. It's hard to get around, but as long as it's not something like that, I would support it.
Okay. Very good. Anyone else have any comments? The motion on the table is to approve. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? The compliance is approved unanimously. Next is 527 Tungus Hill Road, compliance application of Thomas Gannum to convert the second floor of an existing building to 2 residential apartments in the neighborhood design district.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, this item was on your last agenda. It was denied without prejudice. I made a presentation with respect to the overall use and parking last time. I can go through that again if you wish. The main difference here was denied without prejudice because you wanted this to be more residential in character. So the revised architecture now is showing double hung windows on the second floor with shutters more akin to the residential style, and they're showing that that second floor now is going to be completely re-sided with new vinyl shake siding.
Excellent, thanks.
So that is, hopefully addresses the concerns raised by the commission last meeting.
So the other question that was raised, and which we wanted clarified in a revised plan, was that the window coverage on the second floor was greater than the first floor, right? Didn't we talk about that?
It's the reverse, but yes.
I'm sorry, yeah, I misspoke.
The revised plan does indicate on the north elevation, the second floor window area of 56 square feet and first floor area of 85 square feet, and similarly on the east elevation, 28 feet second floor, 48 feet first
Perfect.
floor.
Yep, it's on the left-hand side of
Yes.
the plan. Excellent. Okay. Thank you. Can I have a motion on this?
Motion to approve?
Motion to approve by Commissioner Noonan,
I'll second it.
second by Commissioner Grauer. Commissioner Noonan,
I think you,
turn your mic on.
thank you. The applicants addressed the concerns. Looks like it's a good application now with what we asked for.
Very good.
I would make one recommendation, as I did note last time, even though it was denied, there was a recommendation in our report that the present parking lot is not reflective of the proposed plan. So as a condition, I said the parking lot would have to be revised to comport with the site plan that you have before you.
Okay, so we need to amend the motion to add a condition to revise the parking lot plan?
Right, yes, that
We do?
the
Right.
site be revised to comply with the proposed site plan.
All right, Commissioner Noonan?
Yeah, I would amend my motion as stated last time.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Grauer? Yeah. You agree? Yes? All right, excellent. Good. Anyone else have any comments? Okay, all in favor of the motion to approve with condition as stated? All signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, the motion is granted unanimously. Next is public hearing. 3155 Easton Turnpike Special Exception Application of Sacred Heart University for conversion of use from office to university use in the Design Research and R3 zone.
Professional. There you go. Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, for the record, my name is Bill Fitzpatrick. I'm an attorney in Fairfield with the law firm of Fitzpatrick, Frey & Bologna, with offices at 1735 Post Road. I'm here this evening representing Sacred Heart University, purchaser of the former GE headquarters at 3135 Easton Turnpike. We were before you 2 weeks ago. I'll just repeat a couple of salient points and then get to giving you some more information as requested. This property was purchased by GE from St. Vincent's Hospital in 1971. GE subsequently made a gift of 30 acres of open space to the town of Fairfield. Property now contains, per the assessor's records, 68.46 acres. To reiterate, this property is located in the Design Research District, which includes as permitted uses those uses permitted in the underlying zone. Underlying zone here is R3. R3 zone includes a university use as a permitted use via special exception approval. The property contains 3 primary buildings. The east building, constructed in 1973, is located closest to Easton Turnpike, 3-story building with structured parking under. It contains approximately 172,000 square feet. Second building, known to the university as the west building, is a 3-story building over structured parking. It contains approximately excuse me, 292,000 square feet. The third building is a 3-story, 28-room guest house / conference center. This building was constructed later in 1984, contains 62,393 square feet. There are 787 parking spaces on site. In an unusual allocation, 118 of them are on grade and 669 are structured parking. The commission will recall that Michael Galante was not present at the August 8 P&Z meeting. I offered a pale imitation of his skills. At this point, I'd like to introduce Mr. Michael Galante of Frederick P. Clark Associates to outline his traffic report. Michael.
Good evening, Michael Galante, Frederick Clark Associates, located here in town. And I'm sure Mr. Fitzpatrick did a great job a few weeks ago. But what I'd like to do tonight is really not go through a full-blown traffic study and review, but really is focus on really the key here, which is Table 3 from my report with an August date of this year, 2017, and really just focus on what is the difference between a GE World Headquarters and its traffic, just traffic, and what does it mean to Sacred Heart University as its West Campus? That's really the purpose of this evaluation or study condition here. And I'm just going to focus on Table 3, which is in the report. And I'm sure you can't see it from there, but I see most of you have the report itself. And just want to focus on this. We're very fortunate. We've been involved with Sacred Heart for a number of years as their traffic consultants. And fortunately, we have traffic counts from when GE was open. So back in 2011, when GE was probably at its full capacity, maybe a little bit lower than full capacity, we conducted traffic counts at that driveway, as well as all the other intersections along Route 59, Jefferson Street, Park Avenue, as you know, the Merritt Parkway interchanges, both at Route 59, State Route 59, and the Park Avenue. So we have all of that data. We recently counted those intersections again in May of this year. Schools were open, weather was good. But I want to focus really just on the driveway serving what we now call the West Campus of Sacred Heart University, which is located west of the main campus over on Park Avenue and Jefferson Street. As you know, there's been a lot of modifications to the main campus, new dormitories. Jewish home has been closed. It's now owned by the university. Dormitory rooms being built there or repurposed in the existing buildings. And as you may know, many of the students do not drive, are not allowed to have cars, and live on campus. When I say on campus, it might mean the main campus, it might mean the Jewish home property, or it may mean the units across the street on Park Avenue on the Bridgeport side, just for reference purposes. So as we look at the West Campus, GE facility, and the repurposing of that building, which, quite frankly, as a traffic engineer, we're seeing everywhere. Office buildings are not the big item anymore. And here is a perfect reuse of an existing beautiful campus, actually. And again, back to Table 3, what is the difference between a GE World Headquarters and its traffic when they had hundreds of employees there, several hundred, I believe, and what the purpose of this campus as a school in the future? It would be classrooms, and I'm sure it was described a couple weeks ago, but classrooms and office space for faculty. In some cases coming from the main campus and being moved here. And this table, as I keep referring to but don't talk about, is simply a summary of traffic conditions for the morning and afternoon peak hours. As you know, we deal with peak hour conditions in traffic. Top of the chart, General Electric World Headquarters actually generated, and I can't say it, but 280 trips during the morning peak hour and 254 trips during the afternoon peak. Those are actual traffic counts in 2011. We, of course, have it by turning movements, and we have those numbers. As a reuse of the buildings, and not the entire 3 buildings of GE, but really what they're looking at as far as reusing buildings on that campus. And I look out as a 4 or 5 year plan as far as use of the buildings. There will be a certain portion of one of the buildings that will not be used and simply not planned at this point. Obviously, we will be back, and we need to go back to DOT and so on for approvals for all of this. But we can only look 5 years out with DOT and Oster. So that's one of the reasons why we're focused on this portion right now. But again, it's broken down. The total square footage today is 550,000 square feet, and there are hotel rooms or hotel rooms used by GE in the past. They will be focusing on using 365,000 square feet, and these are approximate numbers, but 365,000 square feet of space and having 185,000 square feet of vacant space within the campus, the buildings. They will be repurposing the first, second, and third floors of a portion of this complex itself to house students, faculty, and certain staff, employees of the university itself. We broke this down based on a lot of discussions and information from the university as far as how we will use this as far as classrooms and faculty office space and so on in the future. And we broke it down by floors, if you will, and the best way for me to really develop traffic conditions. Now keep in mind, many of the students are not driving here. Faculty will be driving here. Students will be really on a shuttle bus. You see the buses traveling around the center of town, which I think is great, but that's how they'll be transported from the main campus dormitories, whatever dormitory they might be in, to this facility. So yes, we are adding shuttle buses to Jefferson Street, and not necessarily all new traffic to Jefferson Street or the driveway itself. So I broke it down. We know we will have 400 students on the first floor. We will have the second floor. We will have about 78 staff members, which include faculty, which will be teaching there. So they're there, or will be there. And then the third floor will include 400 students as they fill up these buildings over a period of time. And then that's during the day. And then during the evening, there'll be evening classes, graduate students, that will drive to this facility. So that is traffic being added to the system. To be conservative, we're looking at adding our traffic to both the morning and afternoon peak hours, including a portion of the evening class startups, if you will, that would start essentially at about 4:30 in the afternoon. Not all 400 students would be there at 8 o'clock in the morning, I'm sure. I'm sure some classes will start at 9, some will hope for starting at 10, and so on. But we assume 400 students are coming in during their morning peak, day students. 400 students are leaving during the afternoon peak, which is essentially 4:30 to 5:30, while we have some students driving there for evening classes starting at 4:30, 5:30, 6:30, and so on. Now keep in mind the actual schedules have not been prepared, but obviously the school has a good idea on scheduling after many years doing this. So I've generated traffic, if you will. I assume certain students are driving during the day. We used about 10% that are day students that are driving. The remaining students are on a shuttle bus coming to this west campus from the main campus, or the Jewish home campus, I'll call it that for reference purposes, and so on. So we have that, and that's shown in brackets. As we go down the process, I'm not going to go through all the numbers, but overall, what will this campus generate as a school? And we have the bus trips, 14 buses serving the students coming in and going out, so it would be double that. And then we have 132 trips in the morning compared to the 281 trips that GE generated in the past. So there's a net change, if you will, a reduction in yes, sir.
So typically when you are preparing these reports and presenting us with this data, you use the manual.
Correct.
And you say, I've got this kind of building in this, zone, in this setting, in this, urban, whatever, and the manual tells me that this site is going to generate X trips in and out during these hours, et cetera. It doesn't sound like you did that here.
You are correct.
And I'd like to know what the manual would dictate as to trips in and out, and why we're not seeing that.
The manual you were referring to is the trip generation handbook, if you will, provided by ITE, the Institute of Transportation Engineers, which we use for most land uses. That document also says if you have more appropriate local data, you should use it. In this case, I can tell you that I can go to a manual for a university. There's nothing in there that will compare to this because it's a unique condition, if you will. We have students living on a campus down the street that will be transported by a shuttle bus to this campus. So I can go to that book and give you a number, and I don't even know what the number is because I didn't even look. because it's just not appropriate. It wouldn't make sense in this case to use that type of information. And I can tell you, when we do schools, and we do all the Fairfield schools and Westport schools and all the schools around, we always do actual traffic counts at an elementary school, middle school, high school, whatever it might be, as opposed to the handbook, the trip generation handbook. So if you go back and all the work we've done over the years, we always go back. We may have provided a comparison because that's more typical, but in a university case, we don't do that.
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Galante, the reason why you feel more confident about this particular data is, it would seem that in the case of the day students, because Sacred Heart on the Sacred Heart East Campus
Main
campus end
campus.
can't allow those students to keep cars there.
Correct.
Because I went to a school that was similar, that there was very limited parking on campus or nearby because the neighbors were hawks and they didn't allow it.
Right.
So the point being that the obvious concern here would be, well, that's very nice that you've added shuttle buses and incorporated that, but why don't I look at the IT manual to see what Ohio State has, or even something small, some other school. But your point is that the reason why you think these are we can think these are reasonably better figures is because the shuttle bus will be a requirement, and it won't be an alternative. It'll be something that someone will have to use because they can't park to drive into the West Campus with their own car. They'd have to be able to have it also back at main campus,
Right.
and they're not going to be able to accommodate in the area around or at the main campus those kinds of cars. So it's better to stick with the shuttle bus.
You are correct. In this
Okay.
case, the student does not have a car.
Right, and so the second point of this is that the evening students are already now in Trumbull, I think, for the most part, in
Yes.
those satellite locations.
Yes.
So you actually have data as to how many students attend those programs, and from that you can very probably base how many trips there are out of that, which you can somewhat transfer, I guess, to what the evening students do. Is that a
Yes,
correct
but what we
description?
assumed, to be conservative, we assumed every student at night drives by themselves.
Right, yeah, so it's
So-
literally one car per each. So
Yes.
that's why you're saying, that's why in this case you think that we can feel some confidence in these numbers related to the day and the evening.
Yes, I'm
You've
very
got
con-
these built in. In other words, what they're moving into the West Campus is already sort of what's existing. They're getting rid of satellite space.
Correct.
They could increase it in the future, but for this current period, those are the two elements you're
They're
feeling. That's
essentially-
the two elements,
They're
the day
essentially
and the
moving
night.
students.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's why you feel good about your data.
And as you know,
All right.
and I feel comfortable, but to be conservative, and I always try to be conservative, for example, the evening classes, everyone's driving by themselves. Because they're typically coming from work someplace. So, and we know that those students come over at certain start times for the evening classes. So essentially what this chart says is that,
Commissioner
Mr.
Francis, I think, had a
Mr.
oh, I'm
question
sorry.
on this.
When you develop, I think it's 2 dorms, large dorms, on the Jewish home property,
well,
will they have no parking also?
there is some parking there, but it's essentially the same. Certain students, I think the first and second year students,
Are
cannot drive.
Not allowed.
Cannot drive. So they can't get a parking sticker to park anywhere. And as you know, around Sacred Heart University, you really can't park on the street. I mean, there really is no place to park. You might be walking a really long distance if you have a car, and I don't think that's going to happen.
So there will be some cars? Because
Be
those-
some cars here, certainly in the evening, for the students that's
Yeah, but
driving, and some
also
cars during the day, and
from
the
those
faculty,
dorms.
we're assuming faculty is driving, of course.
Well, I think that the point that Commissioner Francis is trying to make is that while first and second year students don't have a car, and they would, according to what we're saying, would have to take the shuttle bus.
Shuttle.
There are certain students on campus that do have cars.
Correct.
And it's not going to be only first and second year students that take classes on the West Campus. There will be some
Yes, and I
juniors
don't,
and seniors that do have cars that will take classes on the West Campus, and not every day student is going to be taking a shuttle bus. There will be some cars.
there will be some cars, and we account, and again, we're looking at peak hours, if you will, and we're assuming 10% of them students are driving to the West Campus.
10%.
10%. Keep in mind, you may have a student at noontime that has a class there. That's a
So
senior.
the column, or the row rather, first floor classroom, you've got 400 students arriving, you've got 40 trips,
Correct. Inbound.
okay? And that is assuming that 10% of the 400, 40,
Correct.
are taking, so are the shuttle buses included in here?
The shuttle buses are shown in the parentheses next to it.
Seven shuttle
Seven
buses,
buses in, obviously the same 7 buses out.
right?
And again,
And 40 cars.
just for clarification, that's 1 hour in the morning
Right.
that we're focusing
Yeah,
on.
no, it's going to be spread out over time. I
Yeah.
get it. I'm just trying to clarify the data.
Yeah. No,
So
no,
that's the point.
that's fine.
So we assume 10%, 40 cars, and 7 shuttle buses.
Correct.
And in the morning, for
In a
example.
1 hour period, correct.
Okay.
So we have a decrease in site traffic as a comparison to a GE traffic level, if you will. In the afternoon, again, comparing to a GE number from the past, if you will, 254 vehicles actually counted for the full use of GE's complex back 5-6 years ago. And then the anticipated traffic from the use as the West Campus of Sacred Heart University, there's actually an increase in traffic of about 78 trips, plus about 20 shuttle buses. Now, one table I didn't blow up for you tonight, and is table 4 in the report. If you don't mind just flipping to that, it's right at almost at the back of the report,
It is. It's the last page.
the last page. This is the table that we use here in town, and I think in this case, it's actually a very good table to kind of summarize what we're using and what we have. The intersection of Route 59 at Jefferson Street at the West Campus access drive where the traffic signal is, multi-lane intersection, in the morning peak hour has 2,000 vehicles at the intersection in a 1 hour period. In the afternoon, a 1 hour period, it has, in round numbers, about 1,700 vehicles in a 1 hour period. Our net change in traffic between a GE use and a Sacred Heart use is we're reducing traffic by 121 vehicles in the morning peak. That's a reduction in traffic by about 6%. The afternoon happens to work out the same 6%, but it's an increase of traffic by 6% because we're adding 98 vehicles to the intersection against the 1,700. Analysis of this intersection, how it operates, which we've done in the past, levels of service, anywhere from a B to D, depending on the movement at the intersection. Overall, they work quite well. These are high-volume, high-design intersections with, I'll call it a very sophisticated traffic signal that operates in conjunction with the off-ramps from the Parkway, and I'll call it the northbound off-ramps, even though it's really eastbound on Jefferson Street itself. That works in conjunction with the traffic signal on the north side of the Parkway overpass, going towards Easton and Congress Street at that point. They all work together, very similar to how Interchange 44 works at Black Rock Turnpike. So in essence, and I think really this is really the bottom line, if you will, from this evaluation and comparison, is what is the impact, what is the change in traffic from this development or redevelopment or reuse of this complex from a corporate headquarters to a school use. And it's essentially removing 121 trips in the morning peak, and I'm focusing on one intersection at the moment, and adding 98 trips in the afternoon. So it's a reduction of 6% in the morning and an increase of 6% in the afternoon. It happens to be the same 6%. But that's essentially what this traffic report says.
And so going back to your table 3, and I'm really driving off of some of the comments that Commissioner Alessi had from the last meeting to try to understand, you know, the use of the property, certainly for the limited purpose that's being proposed here, which is in one of the buildings to occupy, you know, only a certain amount of space to leave 185,000 square feet vacant space.
Correct.
Right? So the 550,000 square feet for GE, is that all of the buildings? That's all of the square footage on the property? Or
As
is that-
a GE use,
Yes,
that would have been the entire
that's
complex of buildings.
right, the
Yes.
entire facility.
Yes,
Okay?
yes.
And so the 365,000 square feet with 185,000 being vacant, that explains the entire property, right?
At this point in time, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's like, we're not including another building somewhere, right? You weren't asked to evaluate what if they built the whole thing out?
No, because the honest answer is the university doesn't know how they'll use that vacant space in the
Right.
future.
And I expect to
We had a
hear
lot of
from
discussions about that,
Mr.
actually.
Fitzpatrick, a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
And so, but I just wanted to confirm that, you know, you weren't asked to and you didn't look at, well, what if they, you know, renovated, all of the available space for
Correct.
university use, right?
Because part of that answer is, if I may answer it, part of it, I'm sure Mr. Fitzpatrick will finish the other half of it, is the university doesn't know how they'll use that vacant space in the future, 5 years out from now.
Yep.
So it's an honest answer. We don't have, I didn't estimate anything, because would it be classrooms, would it be faculty space,
Mm-hmm.
a dining facility? I mean, there are a number of things that could be as part of the university.
Could be used for a lot of different
Yeah,
purposes.
beyond, that's correct.
Could be very intense, and others could be not so intense.
That's correct.
Yep.
That's correct.
Very good.
But that's a summary, if you will. I tried to keep it brief and focus on really just one table tonight to help us all understand what is the comparison, what is the difference. In this case, what is the net change,
Yeah.
positive or negative, as it relates to traffic.
So we did hear a little bit about the hotel. We'll call it a hotel.
Sure.
And the overnight rooms in the conference facility, that the university planned to host some events there, maybe some conferences, et cetera. Did you take that into account in?
No, and for a couple of reasons. One is I'm focusing on a typical weekday morning. I'll call it the commuter peak, because it really is. And then again in the afternoon. An event that may occur there would likely not occur at 8 in the morning. It may occur on a Friday evening.
I don't know what conferences you go to, but mine start at 8:30 in the morning.
Yeah, but you
they get out after cocktails at 5:30.
But you sometimes stay at that conference and stay over, so you're not generating any traffic because you're staying at the hotel.
Right, which would mean
So,
that there would be trips in the morning,
it
but
could
not
be.
necessarily that afternoon, but maybe the following afternoon after you check out and
Potentially.
so forth. So, but the long and the short of it is that you didn't take into account the possible uses of that hotel facility for conferences and
Correct.
other
And keep in mind, one of the reasons why I didn't dwell on that is that it's 28 rooms. It's not 150 rooms that really could potentially have an impact as far as traffic.
Yeah.
So,
Commissioner Barrett?
Yeah,
yes, sir.
this was a little different, this traffic report, I said, was with the data. Do you have a sense of what the level of service at that intersection of Eastern Turnpike, Jefferson Street, getting off when GE was there?
Yeah, we've actually analyzed it. It's in one of your reports from 2012.
Yeah.
But it's actually, I believe, an overall level of service B, and that's why I mentioned before.
B, you said, like.
B
as in boy.
B as in boy.
Okay.
But if you look at individual movements at the intersection,
Mhm.
it's likely and is between B and D, depending on the movement. That intersection, actually, it's busy, no doubt,
Mhm.
has 2,000 vehicles during a 1-hour period, but it actually works quite well.
It actually does.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I go
And-
up there, and it's actually better than the Park Avenue to get on the Parkway to go
Parkway.
north, even though it's farther away. It's actually a better approach.
Yeah,
so.
and that's why, in looking at these numbers in Table 3 and the impact on the road system and knowing how these intersections operate, because we've analyzed them in the past, I'm comfortable that we're not going to see something go from a level of service B to D or E or F that we have to analyze and offer mitigation.
Yeah, no, I think there's
Yeah.
a lot of good data here in what we're looking at, but
Yeah.
like the chairman said, we're looking at what was there compared to what's being proposed in this application. It looks like kind of net, like, not much impact, almost like a
Correct.
wash. More in the afternoon, less in the morning, overall, a
Yeah.
wash.
Yeah.
But, considering that, that was all of GE versus, part of, a
Correct.
potential some further development that we don't know what that would be, so I
We
just kind of.
we would be back to
thinking-
analyze that and discuss it.
Absolutely, I'm
Yeah.
just trying to think where that intersection is.
Yeah.
Or we project it to be right now with this application.
Yeah, and we're very fortunate that we have this traffic data from when GE was open.
Mhm.
So we decided quite a while ago to count all of Route 59 at the interchange as part of the main campus analyses that we were conducting and have the data. And we went back out this past spring and counted everything again, a dozen intersections to have a base. So we're tracking traffic, as you will. And we do this in some other cases throughout the town. Yeah.
Anyone else have any other questions? No? Okay.
All right, thank you.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. At this point, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to try to address a few of the issues that arose in the course of the first public hearing. I would like to submit some information to the commission. what I tried to put together for the benefit of the commission is some enrollment figures from the university. The first sheet is the history for the freshman cohort. These are first-time, full-time freshmen entering in the fall, so necessarily, almost necessarily, they'll be in Fairfield. And as the commission can see, there's some increases, one decrease, an average increase per year of 3 1/3%. If you go to the second sheet, this is an analysis of 5 years of total undergraduate. You see undergraduate, full-time and part-time, as well as graduate enrollment, full-time and part-time. And then we just analyzed the total enrollment increase or decrease. In this case, they were all increases over this period of time, and the average increase per year was 6.94%. The point to be made is that while I think there's been a healthy increase particularly in the SHU full-time and graduate student population, 6.94%, it's not an explosion. The purchase of the GE property by Sacred Heart is not an effort to accommodate a student population that the university cannot handle. Rather, it's a recognition of unanticipated, from the university standpoint, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to invest in its future. I offered, I think last time, the School of Business comparison just north of Jefferson Street at the corner of Park and Jefferson. I believe that's approximately 100,000 square feet. I believe it cost in the neighborhood of $60 million to buy the land and build the rather spectacular building. Again, 100,000 square feet for $60 million. The GE purchase is 65 acres with 550,000 square feet of space, GE quality, first-class space, for in the neighborhood of $32 million. It's a no-brainer, and it's a half mile from their existing campus. They watched that Jewish home property, which somebody sold at some point in time, and just said, oh my goodness, if only we could get our hands on that for years. Finally did, and then this comes up, half a mile away, 65 acres, over 500,000 square feet. Obviously, this isn't something they planned for, but it is not the result of some incredible explosion in their student population that demanded it. The university anticipates at least a 4-year gradual move to utilize all of that west building. I told you last time, 2 weeks ago, the Farrington College of Education, presently in Trumbull, will relocate to the west campus. The SHU business office, presently in Trumbull, will relocate to the west campus. The School of Art and Design is likely going to move to the west campus. The University Public Relations Department will relocate to the west campus. Lastly, University Information Technology Services, located on the main campus in many locations, will also be relocated to the west campus. All these will be accommodated in the west building on the GE site. 2 weeks ago, I went through the zoning regulations. One by one, pointed out the conformance of this proposal to those standards. Some of the application of those regulations made less sense than normal because there's no construction proposed here, and a number of those regulations anticipate construction. The question was asked about a master plan for the West Campus. The fact of the matter is there is not a master plan for the West Campus. Master plan usually, particularly the one we submitted many, many, many years ago for the main campus, proposes construction. There is no proposed construction on this campus. The university anticipates to continue to extend its use of the West Campus for office and education purposes. If, in the event, there's a proposal for the East Building, which we have not analyzed or proposed to utilize for any purpose, we will be back in front of this commission. I think that's fair and reasonable. The commission has seen the specifics of this proposal presented by Kevin Herrick of SLAM Collaborative, the project architect. Again, it's going to be at least a 4-year process. If there are unanswered questions, Michael Larabina, University Counsel, again, Mr. Herrick, Mark Izzo, Construction Director, and I will be happy to answer them. The application before the commission is simply a change of use from a GE office use to a Sacred Heart University use. The relevant Section 27 criteria, I believe, are satisfied. I think the record before you supports approval of this application. Sacred Heart's an important member of the town of Fairfield community, and approval of this application is a very important part of the university's plan to grow and thrive in our town. For the reasons I've outlined, I'd request this application be approved. We would be happy, as a group, to answer any questions the commission may have.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Fitzpatrick? No? All right, very good. Thank you very much. Is there any member of the public that wishes to be heard on this application? Hearing none, no rebuttal. I'll close the public hearing on this item.
Thank you.
Next is 1950 Bronson Road, special exception application of Edel Keen to establish a dance yoga studio on a portion of an existing building in the neighborhood design district.
Chairman, members of the commission, my name is Raymond Rizzio. I'm happy to be before you representing Adele Keen with regard to her application for a yoga studio in an NDD. I'm going to give you just some pictures real quickly. The floor plan, which if you have it already, I'm just trying to make it easier for you if I can. And show you. So this application is a property, as you know, in Greenfield Hill Shopping Center. The area is about 800 square feet. Located, if you're facing, you know where Bonda is, if it's to the right of Bonda, to the left of the dog groomer with a recently approved personal trainer right next door. This property used to be a liquor store, and then was a party planning kind of sewing thing, and we are in here to do a yoga studio. Adele has lived in Fairfield. She's here with us tonight. If you have any specific questions, lived in Fairfield. She's been a yoga instructor for over 5 years and would like to open her own small yoga studio. Thought this was the best location for it. The beauty of this, it doesn't require any more parking than is required under the previous uses for the site. Both would require 4. Dell plans, basically, they'll have smaller classes between 5 and 10 students at a time. It will only be, she has 5 instructors, although you only need 1 instructor per class. We're here under section, let me get the number right, 12.5.17.5 is a special exception. Talking with staff, yoga studios are most consistent with dance studios. Basically, group movement in accordance with music, and that's how this ended up being in this district, and we thought it was important. This is basically the front door. If you look through the 3 pictures that I show you, you'll see that's the front door of it, which is next to the new personal fitness, which is next to the body. And then to the other side of it, there's a little clothing store and Bonda. I also took a picture today of what, at about 2 o'clock, what the parking lot looks like. What's great about this use, we also represent the property owner, is it's a great use because of the compatibility of this use with the other uses in the site. Bonda doesn't open for lunch, doesn't open till 5:30. Dog groomer is basically a drop-off. I get my dog groom there, and we're there. You drop off, you leave. There's never more than 2 or 3 cars, which are the employees that are there for any particular period of time. The personal trainer is a one-on-one trainer. The clothing store doesn't have a lot of turnover. So that side of the Greenfield Hill shopping center gets very little parking, except at night, which usually starts around 7 o'clock with Bonda, and most importantly, that's usually the weekend nights, Friday, Saturday, Sunday nights. Our classes will probably start early in the morning, probably anywhere from 6 a.m., and classes starting no later than 8:30. So as you can see, there's not going to be, the compatibility of all the uses in the center work perfect for this type of use. We're a small use. We're not going to have a ton of classes. It is group. It's, like I said, typically between 5 and 10 people. The space is very small. If you look at the handouts that we've given you, basically you have an office, storage, and then you have the studio, which is one room with a bar. People will bring their yoga mat. I'm not sure how much everybody's done yoga, but
Thanks.
I figure just you've seen it or haven't seen it. So all in all, we believe this satisfies all the special exception standards, has no negative impact on any of the neighboring properties. The property owner to the north and to the south both support this application, and we respectfully request this commission grant this application. I'd be happy to answer any questions, but I think it's all pretty straightforward, and I hope I summed it up so that you understand. I think this is the perfect use for this site.
Okay. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Attorney Rizio? Commissioner Francis?
Is the restroom handicap accessible?
What's that? Yes. This is ramp, level, goes to, any improvements go through the building department. There's no issues there.
She was asking about the bathroom.
The bathrooms?
Yeah.
I don't know if the
It looks like it is.
typically, to go through the building permit process, you need to make it wide enough that it's certainly handicapped adaptable. Given the yoga studio use, I'm not so sure how much that will come into play. We'll do whatever we're required to do by the building department to improve the site.
Any of that?
Mr. Chairman,
Yep. Commissioner Noon?
is there Bikram yoga?
No. It gets hot in there, but there won't be Bikram yoga. No, it's not the hot yoga. It's traditional yoga.
Doing yoga in a sauna.
Yeah, it's like at 110 degrees. It's really good for big guys. Once you make you wilt.
Anyone else? No? Okay. Thank you, Attorney Rizzo.
Chairman, members of the commission, thank you for your time.
Thanks.
Appreciate your consideration.
Any members of the public wish to be heard on this item? No. Hearing none? Yes? Oh, please, come up. Yes. I'm sorry. So you're not out of line. The applicant has made their presentation. We're now in a point in the hearing where members of the public are permitted to come in and speak to the application. Just come up to the podium. You need to use the microphone to make it part of the record, and just state your name and address for the record. And no time limits. You can say whatever you like. Just keep the comments germane to the application.
My name is Paul Howard. I am the owner of 2040 Bronson Road, the property adjacent to the area. My question does not really pertain to the zoning regulation that you were talking there. We were more curious, the 1960 Bronson Road special permit, is that going to be addressed tonight?
1960 Bronson Road are the next two items on the agenda.
That's what our concerns were. We didn't know because it wasn't on the docket for August 3rd, and we were not given any sort of notice. We got kind of blindsided by this.
Okay. The next items I'm going to call are a zoning regulation amendment and 1960 Bronson Road.
So we'll address that. Thank you.
Okay.
I don't have any rebuttal for those comments.
Very good. I'll close the public hearing on this item. Next, item C or 3 and 4 are companion, I'll call them together. Zoning regulation amendment, application of the Hull House Group LLC to amend section 12.5.5 of the zoning regulations, and also 1960 Bronson Road, special permit application of the Hull House Group LLC for an addition and conversion of a portion of an existing building to residential use in the neighborhood design district.
Chairman, members of the commission, my name is Raymond Rizzio. I'm representing Hull House LLC and its principal, Mr. Larry Foley.
Could you just pull the microphone up a little bit?
Pull it up
I'm
like
having
that?
a little
There you go.
there. That's much
Thanks.
better. Thank you.
With regard to a request for a text amendment, and we're requesting a text amendment to section 12.5.5. That is, and let me get through the, Chairman, I guess how do you want to handle this? I'll go through the text amendment. Can we ask that these two be combined because?
I called them together. I figured you could present them together.
Correct.
We do, as you know, have to deal with these separately.
Correct.
So, I would appreciate, we would appreciate hearing,
Yes.
your presentation.
I'll take you through the text amendment. We may be using the application, the special permit application as a hypothetical example of
Right.
what could be going on with regard to this text amendment. So, in taking the text amendment, it's actually a pretty straightforward amendment. I've actually been involved with multiple projects that have had to address these issues, and it's an interesting.
Is what you're handing us right now different from what was filed in the application?
No, but what it is what I handed, all you got filed was our proposed amendment.
Right.
What I'm handing you right now is just in pink what the current regulation states.
Okay.
So what I just wanted to do is take you through what the current regulation states, explain why we have issues and why I think there should be an amendment to that, then take you through the amendment and then how it impacts, especially things in the neighborhood design district. So in the neighborhood design district, we can have residential uses provided they don't exceed 50% of the use. And when this reads and I've had a couple projects in other zones where we've had to deal with this issue, and either do it by ZBA waiver or do it by a text amendment. But residential uses provided, 12.55 says, provided shall not be located on a ground floor and not to exceed more than 50% of the total floor area of the building, and no building of mixed residential businesses shall contain more than 2 stories devoted to residential use. Sounds pretty easy until you have an issue where you have multiple buildings on one piece of property. So the issue becomes, if you have multiple buildings on one piece of property, how does the 50% application apply to every building, or does it apply to which we think is in the spirit, is to keep at least 15% of the floor area, second or third floor on a property, no more than that be residential. In other words, right now, and I'll tell you why it becomes difficult in certain situations. If you go to the next page, page 52, no individual building shall exceed a maximum of 14,000 gross square feet. So, for example, if there was a situation like exists at 1960 Bronson Road, where you have 2 buildings. Each building is approximately 9,000 square feet. What you typically would be able to do if you were only going to count one building is you would be able to attach the building with in this instance, a walkway. You have one building, but that would exceed 14,000 square feet. Our problem with the regulation is, I think the intent is to keep retail and office on the first floor, keep everything commercial on the first floor to service the community, and then only have residential on the upper floors. In a 2-story building, 50% is pretty easy. But when you get to a 3-story building, and then you get multiple buildings on a property, it's very difficult to do a situation that works. For example, if you have 3 stories, do you only make, and you want to do 50% residential? Do you do a story and a half residential, and the other half, the second floor becomes office and the third floor becomes residential? Or do you just have 2 stories of commercial? So we always thought our intent of the regulation was, look, we want to keep the commercial active, we want to keep it on the first floor, we'll let you have residential, but we don't want higher density residential to overtake a property that's commercial. Can I ask you a question? Commissioner?
I have a question whenever you're done.
That's
I do not want to interrupt you, Mr.
No,
Chairman.
I'm used to that.
Right.
I just want to make sure I'm next, it's okay. No, I have a question about
We'll call on you next. I
Yeah.
mean,
Let him
you got
finish.
it.
You
got
can
it.
ask me a question anytime. Go ahead.
I think Commissioner Barrett's is appropriately deferring to your presentation.
Okay, he was just raising his hand,
I just
so-
want to be,
Whole thing.
I just wanted the chair to note that I have a
Yep.
question next when you're done.
You got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, situation like this, we decided what we would do is, and we've talked with staff, we've looked at a number of different ways to deal with this. Our proposal is that the residential use provided are permitted, provided it shall not be located on the ground floor and not to exceed more than 50% of the total floor area of the building located on any one property, and no building of mixed residential use shall contain no more than 2 stories devoted to residential use. What does that do? It allows the flexibility to, when there's multiple buildings, and then on top of that, within the neighborhood design district, a maximum number of square footage that you can, so that you can't connect the buildings. It satisfies the spirit by saying we keep commercial on the first floor, residential can be on the second or third floor, provided when you add up the square footage on the building, and the building's located on the property, the residential component cannot exceed 50%. So, for example, a situation that exists at 1960. This building is 9,600 square feet, 100% commercial. This building, we hope to convert to the second and third floor into residential, only 4 units. And basically having loft space, a second floor space, or townhouse type space. What this allows this to do, the total combined, I have a ratio, I'll give you a handout on this, is only 34% commercial on the overall property. There's another reason why this is important, especially when it goes to residential.
Only 34% in that building.
Total.
In
No,
that
in the building, it's about 66% of that one building. As far as a total property, meaning the 2 buildings combined, the residential in one of the buildings, second and third floor, and then you add in the commercial space on the first floor, and you add all the space combined, you end up at about 34% for the total property. So I'll give you an example of how this works as it relates to this property. And what's really important, and I will tell you, in a lot of your neighborhood design districts, a lot of these business areas were kind of developed as, neighborhood commercial. A lot of them suffer from lack of parking. They go up and down, and you look at all, you go along parts of Reef Road, you go along in areas of Southport, there's a neighborhood design district, up on Tunxus Hill. I have a list of all of them. But pretty much along Stratfield Road, they don't pencil out to today's commercial standards. A lot of them were older, non-conforming properties that ended up coming into the neighborhood design district. They weren't built with that intent. In fact, I think the 14,000 square foot restriction came much after this building was built. I think it was an addition that I somehow think was probably linked to, because since most pharmacies are about 14,000
It
square
was
feet.
in 2007, I believe.
Yeah, so long before these things were envisioned. So what happens is the residential parking requirement is so much less that, for example, in an instance like this, and as we get later into the presentation, I'll show you, we currently have a non-conforming parking situation where we're 3.4 spaces per thousand, which is very difficult to attract any type of traditional office user. And in fact, as offices developing, more people, offices, if you know, cubicles, you get more people in less space than you've ever had before. The parking demands from tenants is a lot more than 3.4 to house the people they want to put in a suburban office. They typically are back office. They typically have open areas, large cubicles, and as many people as they can fit in there. When you shift this to residential, for example, in a situation like this, by the regs, we would need about 75 parking spaces. We have 63. When you shift it to residential, and you go down to the 2 or between, depending on how many units are, somewhere between 2 and 3 per unit, and then you have the ability to cut that by 50%, we would actually end up with a conforming parking situation by being able to convert our second and third floor office into residential. So what's hard is when you have a lot of these non-conforming properties and they have to evolve with the times. The ability and the flexibility is very essential to address the needs of the market, address the needs of the demands of people, yet also satisfy your POCD, which we have where you're looking for diversification of housing types. So the residential is permitted. We're trying to make it adaptable so that we don't so-called bastardize your regulation. The whole intent of the regulation is we don't want residential on the first floor, and we don't want to overtake these little community centers, meaning we don't want more than 50% of our square footage to be residential. None of that gets touched. All we're saying is keep the commercial on the first floor, give the owners some flexibility as to how they distribute their second and third floors where there's multiple buildings. That's really all this is. So the use is permitted. It's just how we're distributing. I don't think it changes the character of the neighborhood. Frankly, I'll give you a letter as we go on from Mr. Galante. The reduction in traffic is considerable when you shift 4,500 square feet of office space to 4 two-bedroom residential units. So the parking demands, the traffic demands are much more consistent with the uses that the uses and the type of intensity of use that this commission would like to see in these neighborhood districts, which don't sit on the post road. They don't typically sit on, 1 or 2 of them sit on Black Rock Turnpike, but they're in areas that are surrounded by residential properties. We have canvassed and we've dealt with who we think are we met with Green Hill Village. They'll express their views, points themselves. But the property owner to the south is Klein Mars. He has a letter which I'll submit tonight that totally supports the application. We dealt with the only 2 neighbors who are across the street who have see what we're proposing, and they don't have any objection to the application.
That's the 2 neighbors across the street from
on Hillside.
Across
Yeah,
Hillside?
the application for 19, that's part of the special amendment, but the application is for the special permit application. There's 2 buildings on the site. One fronts Hillside, one fronts Bronson.
Right.
The building on Bronson. What I'd like to do, as we start to move from, I think you understand, if there's any...
So Commissioner Barrett, do you have a question on the regulation?
Yeah, I do. It's on the regulation. On the 14,000 square feet, I believe, and I want Mr. Wendt to confirm this, that's something we did fairly recently. We were changing the neighborhood design business district regulations, and I believe it was in 2007. I could be wrong. It was when we made some other changes. We actually took an inventory of all properties in that and tried to come up with a maximum square footage of the building. And I believe we arrived at 14,000 that way. So that's not you're right, that's not a old regulation. That was new and it had a specific purpose. Mr. Wendt, am I getting that correctly, or? That's correct. So you were part of the group that took the inventory of all the neighborhood design properties in town, because we didn't want to make a lot of non-conforming, and I believe there was only 2 or 3 of them, maybe in excess of 14,000 square feet. So how did we regard this property where you've got two on this, again, this is the unique situation, it's two on the same property, neither one are above 14,000, but combined they are, so.
Yeah, Jim went for the record. The regulation, it limits a single building to 14,000 square feet. So what we did, the exercise we undertook was to try to get what the average size was, an inventory, and how many there are over a certain size. There was my recollection anyway, yours have probably the best institutional memory I've ever encountered, but my memory was that it was not long after a building of approximately 13,000 square feet was approved on Reef Road in a neighborhood design district.
Yeah.
So in the aftermath of that application,
Yeah, it was probably-
the
yeah, it was
commission
that one.
asked us to undertake that exercise.
Yeah.
So there weren't very many. We did.
There weren't many that exceeded it.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. But
mean-
as far as these existing buildings were concerned, they would have been considered at their individual size, not their collective total.
Okay. So they were, my point, Mr. Rizzo, they were considered at their individual size. Here, what I understand you want to do, again, the application we're going to hear is take one of the buildings and put 2 stories of residential on it, but count the other building in this new text amendment so that all the square footage on the property will
Correct.
apply.
Correct.
So to get the benefit of the other building, which is, as your table shows, 100% commercial. And would
Correct.
remain 100%
Correct.
commercial after this application.
Correct.
And it actually could, there is a possibility under the proposed regulation that they could include some measure of residential on a second or third floor.
But they could never
in the
exceed
other
50%.
building. But the combination of residential between the 2 buildings on the second and third floors could not exceed 50% of the total floor area. But it wouldn't necessarily be 50% in any one building.
Right, but as long as, what's really important, which I thought is important and consistent with the spirit of the reg, it's no residential on the first floor.
Well, you don't change that.
Right.
I mean, so, I understand you're trying to emphasize that, but you're not looking,
No.
you don't propose to change that.
No.
Which I agree is important and certainly was a
The funny thing is,
significant
if we got a
aspect of the
variance to
regulation.
go above 14,000 square feet because the 2 buildings exist and all we want to do is attach a structured, covered walkway between the 2, you get a variance to go from 14,000 to 18,000 feet with adding, really no square foot, livable space, and you have 1 building. And then you don't even need a text amendment. But in this instance, here's the beauty of what we're proposing. It allows people to be creative if there's multiple buildings on the site. No matter what, you have to come back before you for a special permit if you don't think it's appropriate. No matter what, it can't be on the first floor. And no matter what, it can't exceed 3 stories. So it'll prevent the bifurcation of floors, which you never like to have. In other words, in this instance, where you could have half the second floor be commercial, and then half the second floor and the third floor be residential. That never really seems to work.
No, but that's not precluded by your proposed
No.
regulation.
No, but would all be subject to your,
Discretion. Well,
Right.
It's the special permit.
Correct.
But one could still, and based upon the ratios that we have here, if you were to include some additional residential in the other building, by virtue of the 50% cap, you would have to have a combination of commercial and residential on a second or third floor. I mean, that's it, because otherwise you'd be violating the 50%
yeah,
cap.
I just don't think you'll see people going. It doesn't really work.
Well, as a practical matter, agreed, but, that's not an aspect of the regulation, yeah.
I just want to point out, we actually changed our neighborhood design districts in 2007 to make a number of changes, including the 4,000 square foot. I was wrong, Mr. Wendt, it was actually in 2013, so it was more recently that we made
Yeah,
the 14,000
that's what I
square foot
thought.
change. So it was only, again, this is only 4 years ago, and there was a lot of thought and deliberation and analysis, that's why I just wanted
We're
to
not
take
touching your,
advantage of
we don't
that.
want to touch your 14,000 square feet.
No.
I'm just telling you,
No, but the
probably
point-
an unanticipated
No.
consequence
It wasn't
was
though,
that
and that's,
becomes a cap.
and that is Commissioner Barrett's point, is that it wasn't. And so, I didn't say anything because I didn't have the data in front of me, but I didn't think it was 2007, because I remember doing it, and I wasn't on the
Right.
commission in 2007.
Yes.
And I do remember being in that room and us having these debates.
Mhm.
You just confirmed it's 2013.
January 2013, yeah.
And this building was, these buildings and this property were in existence in 2013 when we amended the regulation the way that we have.
Correct.
So it was in the mix of inventory that we considered when we were looking at the floor area, that, you know, that, all the different things. And it's, you know, it's.
I don't
this was-
necessarily,
this was a big-
I would be, I wasn't there, but I would be, I don't know that the issue that's before you would probably come into consideration, meaning how, you know,
Yeah,
how
right.
does
No,
this
it's-
cap?
it's a quirk, no
How does
doubt.
this cap affect?
Yeah.
And typically, text amendments are used to address quirks, because you take a text amendment, and then when you stress it, when it stresses, there's certain things that you might not have taken into account, like a situation like this, that leads to, hopefully, an amendment to correct what we think would be something that, to make the regulation still consistent with your, with the intent of your regulation, without impairing, having any negative effect on the neighboring properties, put it that way.
Any other questions on the regulation amendment? Okay, so let's move on
All
to
right.
the
So,
proposal.
I took a bunch of pictures, and if you kind of keep them in order, I'll take you through a little tour of the site, although I know everybody knows it. I just want permission to understand what we're dealing with.
So, have you been providing copies to our clerk? You did, okay, the pictures, everything you're handing out tonight?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So, what I tried to do was capture what this building's like and what's around. So, what we're proposing, let's just take you along. Property's two buildings, both almost sister buildings. They pretty much match each other in dimension, they match each other in shape. This building grew a little more because they're using part of the third floor, so that's 9,600 square feet. This one's currently 9,000, but also has a very large mechanical area that we're going to use as part of the second floor. We call it the second, third floor is actually townhouses. There are 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, and
That's the proposal.
that's what our proposal is. So, pursuant to our special permit, we worked with Jack France, David Leibowitz is here, to design something that didn't change the characters of the building, didn't create any additional footprint, stretched a little bit with some dormers to give it more of a colonial look. The building's kind of, I don't know, I don't think Jack would ever say he designed these. I'm pretty sure he didn't design them. They were not actually in a Francis kind of motif there. So what we've done is we wanted to design 4 units, which we thought would make sense. We have a real issue with regard to parking. Our parking and attracting office users is very difficult. What I've done is I've broken out this is kind of a, you have this in your larger plans, but this is kind of a breakout of what the parking summary is, and I put in the bottom what the current parking spaces are, and then we show how we're at that we become compliant parking if this commission decides to accept and grant a reduction down to 50% of what we're proposing. So currently our permit would require 75 spaces. We only have 63 spaces. That creates a real problem for any type of office building given today's day and age. This is not a situation where, I don't think this building was built, they were kind of destination buildings. It works. Mr. Foley's business currently occupies the building that fronts on Bronson Road and takes the entire building. But suburban office has become very challenging, you all know that. Then given this situation where you don't have any kind of public transportation to get there, so that everybody who comes here will need a car to get there, so that you end up in a situation where you have half of an office building that's underparked and it's very difficult to attract any kind of tenants. By converting the residential, you'll see the parking summary above what I wrote on the bottom, the current parking summary, we become totally compliant. We end up with requirement of 62 cars. What's important about that is compatibility, and this commission has always looked at it, especially in mixed use. The residential parking demands versus the commercial parking demands have typically justified the reduction in the parking requirement. So that was essential in trying to figure out what is the appropriate thing to do with this building. So, as you can see, we have a first floor which will be can be broken up into 4 smaller office suites for 1 space. Second floor has your main kitchen, living area, and master bedroom. And the third floor has another bedroom and a sitting area and a full bath. There's been a lot of demand for apartments in Fairfield. There's been a lot of demand for people who like Greenfield Hill, who like to stay there, maybe downsize, but or have this as a seasonal type place. One of the other things that's important, Mr. Foley's done, and I'll show you the picture at the end, he's done an incredible job of retrofitting and redoing the whole Greenfield market. So everything they've done there has been first class. I think it will continue to be that. These will be very good high-end apartments that are going to service a need, and they're also well protected from the neighborhood. So if you take a look at these pictures, the pictures start. This is a picture from one of the side from one of the side areas, looking back at the building, and you can see, I just want to show how heavily landscaped this is. The side of the buildings will not change. The third picture is a picture of the courtyard that exists between the 2 buildings. One of the, like I said, earlier solutions were to attach the buildings, but we had the 14,000 square foot height limitation, size limitation that we had to deal with. This is a picture of the building that will be retrofitted to the first floor will remain commercial, and the second and third floor dormers will be added, and the second and third floor will be for townhouse units. So now if you look toward the type of landscaping that's there, this is the landscaping if you looked out from the front door facing Hillside Road. So the building sits well below the road and is landscaped with, I got to say, those trees are probably 12 to 15 feet high and continue to grow. Another picture looking back from this parking lot, you look across and you see the Greenfield Hill Shopping Center between the other side, and then how well the other side of the property is landscaped and buffered. This is the only other property, this is this area here, which is this side parking lot, and how well that is landscaped and buffered so that it's not visible from any of the neighboring properties. The only other building that would be visible is what was the old real estate office. To the right, to the north of the real estate office was the bank, and those are both owned by Mr. Foley. Now, if you look at the only properties that we believe actually will see the apartments, both these neighbors have no issue with our application, and that is from this property here, this picture here, is taken from the front yard of 104 Hillside. As you can see, you can barely see the building. The landscaping is mature, the landscaping is in, and frankly, the lack of activity is important. That's also from the building at 104, and then I took it from the front of, I believe it's 80 Hillside Road. Now, there's a lot in between, which is 88 or 82 is property. It's a picture that sits probably about 100 yards back. It's a rear lot. I also wanted to give you I'm sure you've all been by it, but the kind of work that was done with regard to Greenfield Market and restoring. So this would be an excellent place for somebody who wanted to have a small apartment and to stay. We believe it's the appropriate use for it. We get rid of our non-conforming parking problem, and we end up with a very attractive building. David, why don't I introduce you to take them through the architecture, and then the floor plans, and then I'll go through and then I'll sum up with regard to some other documents that I'd like to present to you.
Attorney Rizzio? Yeah. Just before you go away. If you wouldn't mind, why don't you get those documents that you intend to hand out together and hand them over to the clerk, and she can pass them around while we're doing this?
Sure.
It's 5 after 10. We got a curfew of 11. We have some folks in.
Much longer.
Okay. We have some folks in the audience I know want to speak. Okay. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
I'm David Wojtowicz with Jack Franzen's office here at 1241 Post Road, Fairfield. And as Ray has concluded, the site work is naturally minimum disturbance. None of the landscaping is being disturbed in this application. Almost 100% of the work is internal to that existing one building on Hillside. The floor plans you have indicate no additions. We do need an elevator to meet handicap standards. The 4 units will meet a type B handicap standard, so they'll be accessible, which is a nice amenity, larger bathrooms, bigger doorways.
Will any units actually be built handicap compliant?
Yes, to a type B standard is the building code requirement for up to 4 units. If you're building multiple units, there's level A, level B.
Right.
B is a pretty good maneuverability standard. Grab bars could be added, amenities could be added if needed.
Yeah. Excellent. And does the plan increase the overall height of the building?
It does not. We're working within the existing roof line. Naturally, for the upper bedrooms in the upper lofts of the townhouse design, we need dormers for light and ventilation to meet the code for bedroom egress and light and ventilation. The dormers are less than, give or take, 40% of the roof area, so they're just smaller dormers. They're below the existing roof main, and I can show that to you.
Yep.
One side of the building has an existing dormer that walks out to the roof, so if you notice on that upper townhouse plan, there's a plan to use that upper roof as a patio for 2 of the units.
Right.
That already exists in place as a dormer and a walkout as part of the mechanical design there.
Right. Any new mechanicals be visible?
No, not in fact, the commercial mechanicals are a much bigger system than what you need for a residential use for the apartment. So we'd be split systems, smaller condensing units. The residential ones will put back up in that screened area at the roof level, which is where the bigger units are now for the commercial use. You'll see them noted on each side of the patio screened, and they're behind railings. They're two stories up. There's no visibility requirement there. And being the first floor with the lighter use office space, those would be converted to smaller split systems. Once again, a small ground condenser that is not going to be visible from any aspects of the property.
Excellent.
So as you can see on the elevations, we did add 3 more dormers similar to the existing one. They're all within the walls of the roof line and within the roof line of the existing building, but substantially below the ridge height of that existing building. And windows would be sized to match and honestly, the building has egressable size existing windows. So we don't have to alter the second floor window scheme that exists. That complies and meets with any of the regulations for window openings. So we don't have to cut any brick, we don't have to alter the appearance of these existing buildings,
Excellent.
or this one existing building.
Thank you.
If there's any questions?
Does anyone have any questions?
Does this building have an external generator?
There is, on site there is.
The area out front where you saw that very heavy landscape is the generator, which is right here.
Okay.
You recall.
Grade, and then is landscape on both sides.
It's landscape. Is there any changes to this as a result of this project?
Now, one of the things we talked about with the neighbors was adding a, what would you call the waffle,
A sound wall.
a sound wall around the generator. Although it's not part of this application, and talking to the neighbors, if that was something, because they were concerned about the size of the generator. Generator's all permitted, the generator's all
Yeah. So
approved.
the generator was the subject of earlier controversy
Yeah,
right.
with the neighbors on the site.
Well-
Complies with the
If
sound
this-
ordinance and so forth, complies with zoning regulations, et cetera. But I'm presuming that in your dialogue with the neighbors and soliciting the support and the letters that you have, there was some effort to accommodate.
We had agreed, especially some of the neighbors across the street were very concerned, and we would agree to that as a condition of approval, that how would you call it, sound barrier fencing would be a sound barrier fence. I don't call it fencing, you would call it a.
There's a couple of methods that we can do within that enclosure inside the tree line. So the trees would
Right.
remain
No,
outside.
I understand. So
And we would do it inside.
Is there a specific proposal that you've agreed to with the neighbors for a kind of sound barrier?
No, we've told them that there was that we would place a sound barrier in between the trees and the generator. We also we also have our own, we're adding, 4 neighbors to the neighborhood also, so we would like,
Right.
it makes
Yeah.
sense for us also. But that was really driven by the demands of the neighbors. I will tell you, the other thing is, go ahead, I'm sorry, I'll keep going. No, the generator goes off, I think, because I went and listened to it, it goes off Tuesdays between 1 and 1:15. You probably all had to go out there and listen to it.
At Tuesday, yeah. That was a few years ago. I just wonder if there's any change to that, because
No.
I remember this property from that.
Other than we will agree as a condition of approval to add a sound barrier wall around the generator.
Right. Okay.
Actually, no more than 6 feet high, so we don't violate any fence standards or structure standards.
Yeah. So, very good. So we don't have any questions on the site plan or anything like that, right? Okay.
All right. If I could sum up, I've given you some things. Number one would be with regard to the regulation and how it's consistent with your plan of conservation and development and your goals for housing. You talk about diversification of housing, accommodations for many individual desires of our population. We believe this would be an excellent addition. For example, the apartments down at the Brick Walk are always full. People love living down there. They like to be in the community. In this instance, where you have hopefully a yoga studio, a personal fitness trainer, a restaurant, and a market all within walking distance, it would seem to me that this would be the residential component to this project would be excellent. There also says encouragement for residential units on upper floors in commercial areas to bring added vitality to a business district. In this instance, the regulation itself, once again, states that it must be on the upper floors, does nothing to discourage development on the upper floors, and we think in this instance it'll actually encourage additional residential development on upper floors of the properties. I gave you a little aerial which we've showed where the adjoining buildings are and where our building is, and as you can see, the only 2 properties that even have a glimpse really at this building are the 2 properties across the street, of which both neighbors support that application. I'm also giving you a copy of Mr. Galante's report, which he studied 4,500 square feet of office versus 4 apartments. I'll just read you his findings. Was that the existing office space comprising 14,200 square feet of floor area, is estimated to generate 52 vehicle trips during the weekday period peak hours. Findings of this analysis indicate that the redevelopment of the subject property to convert the existing office space to residential units will result in a reduction in traffic on area roadways during the weekday morning, weekday afternoon, and Saturday midday peak hours. The results in a reduction of potential impacts to the area roadways and will not require any modifications to traffic control, pavement markings, or site access. So Mr. Galante looked at this and basically tracked the number of vehicle trips, and as you can see, it results in a reduction. Then most importantly, I think what's important is when you look at this application in connection with the regulation with which it sits and the lack of intensity and density that it adds. So what I did was I took our zone standards and just highlighted that we are 3 stories, which is what's permitted. Our building lot coverage as a percentage of lot area is only 15.5%. We're not changing 15% when it's permitted to have 75%. And our maximum floor area only increases to 35% from 29%. That to me is very important. So this is not something that is crowding a neighborhood. This is not something that's overtaking a neighborhood. And most importantly, what we do is we give this project and the amendment, if it's proposed, the ability to become conforming as relates to parking. So we believe the net effect of this regulation will be to add a new type of housing to this area, which is desired by your master plan. It'll reduce and get rid of a non-conforming property, make it more viable, make it contributing to the area, and give people we think an excellent place to live. I think what happened and why we need this text amendment, I think it's one of those situations that when you stress changes in amendments and changes as they relate to other properties, I don't think this was something that was considered the effect. Other properties that this has worked out even very well is if you look at the Delamar. The Delamar has, although they have their housing is not 50% per each building. They receive variances, and their housing has some buildings, it's a great mixed use, but the overall commercial use on the property, the residential use does not exceed 50%. But I think that's the blend that you're looking for. You're not looking to just say, take it building by building. I understand, especially in these smaller areas where you think people are going to walk things, you want to keep the first floor commercial. But the balance of second and third floor, I think the flexibility is very important. There's some other projects in town that have also received, that have multiple buildings, and rather than require a connection, even though they were in a different zone, they received a variance to let the building be 100% as long as residential, as long as there wasn't commercial, there was not residential on the first floor, and that the overall building, the overall residential use on a property did not exceed 50%.
Right. Got it. Commissioner Kennelly?
I wondered if you worked with staff on, the staff from from the town planning office on this to develop this text
Yes.
amendment? In the course of your work with staff, did you and Mr. Wendt or anybody of the staff there do any kind of analysis what the impact would be on all the other neighborhood design business districts in terms of what are the kind of potential unintended or consequences we may not know about? Was there discussions about that at all?
We've actually, and I can submit to you, we have all the other design districts.
Right.
And I don't know in any of the other neighborhood design districts that I saw a multiple building situation. And maybe one of the things that the commission could consider, so that you don't worry about combination things, could be multiple buildings in existence at the time of this amendment.
Yeah, but can I ask you a second thing too? I heard you say nonconformity. You mentioned a variance. Was there any consideration, because I mean, I'll hear what the neighbors say in terms of what they think about harmony and stuff, or whatever their issues are or may not have. But I mean, at first blush, I sort of think some of it seems like a really interesting reuse, and Franzen's a great architect and stuff. So I'm not, the building, that seems okay, but what I was wondering is Was there ever consideration where you said, you know, look, basically I am keeping it ground floor commercial. I'm basically I do want to expand that amount to that you know, get above 50% here, but I'm doing it in a way that's, like you mentioned, the Delmar. Was there ever consideration maybe looking to some sort of variance route or something else where you wouldn't have to necessarily change our regs to get what you wanted?
We did look at that.
Yeah, and I'm just curious, like, what was the because I mean, you mentioned here that this will actually get you conforming on parking. So if I was sitting on ZBA and I was saying, hey, damn, I'd give this guy a variance, not only am I, you know, doing, you know, helping him redevelop, and he's got an unusual two-building setup here, but also I'm solving the problem, the parking problem. But what was the issue? I'm sorry.
Well, the hard part is, and
I'm just asking. I'm just
still,
curious.
I have no idea. You'll hear from the Greenfield Village Association. And our immediate neighbors don't have an issue that are affected by this.
Right.
For some reason, the Greenfield Village Association is not comfortable with the application. I don't get why.
So you were concerned.
Hold on. So in the context of a variance, you were concerned about the Greenfield Hill Village Association opposing.
In other words, you might have a very good case for
if we went for a
about the
variance.
opposition. Is that it?
I got
So the idea was you're going to get appealed if you go for a variance, and we felt that really what was appropriate here was a text amendment.
So last thing, and just to circle back to that business about the unintended consequences, you handed out, what, is this examples of how this would impact other, I mean, I'm just trying to understand if I...
Well, I just made I gave a list of all the other neighborhood design districts. There's an overhead picture, it's not
Right,
great.
right.
I'm sure staff could look at it pretty quickly.
Right.
We will,
We've identified
we will.
them all. And this is a kind of unique situation. I would think that where you do have situations, I mean, it's a unique situation, but I don't think it's one that the regulations, when they were drafted the way they were drafted, I don't believe looked into this type of situation. That's what I would say.
Well, because if it's singular, it feels like a variance to me. But whatever, I mean, I'll take a look at that materials. But the point is there wasn't some, you know, look, for example, when we as a commission in 2013 thought about, how are we going to deal with NDBD? And one of the things we talked about was, hey, what's that cap number going to be? And we've battled, I can recall, and I was in the summer, Matt, I recall it very well now, after you guys prompted me. And we really, you know, discussed, hey, what's that going to be? And we had the staff actually do an analysis, as was mentioned here. So that's would be my concern, is that I as well, I don't want to hold you up in terms of things like having to do with the appeals with that. I wish there was somehow that there was, you know, firmer ground that I could kind of get a sense. But I'll take a look at all the other districts and figure that out. I mean,
our issue has been, I don't think that, and you can't possibly, when you go into a text, and it's where you have text amendments, when you adopt the text amendment, you can't consider every consequence to it. So what we're here is basically looking for an element of fairness, an element that I don't think the consequences of the amendment of adding the 14,000 square feet was to make sure that this building was not combined so that you couldn't consider the fifth.
Yeah, I mean, there's a framework within which we need to address a proposed amendment to the regulations.
Correct.
Whether time and experience dictates a need for a change, whether it's in harmony, blah, 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 blah. So, you know.
And you can't
we'll have to
possibly consider every property in every
No, you
situation.
can't. I'm just thinking about broadly what happens when we change the regs to all the neighborhood design business districts to deal with one particular unique property.
Exactly.
And then later, I don't know whether or not that one
No,
unique
it's
property doesn't have other effects I haven't considered.
Exactly.
And
it's
I don't,
something
when
that
the,
we need
to
to
think about. And-
figure out. But Attorney
one thing-
Rizio's answered the question.
Can I add one thing as relates to that? I will tell you, one of your biggest problems in the neighborhood, having been here all my life, one of your biggest problems with all the neighborhood design districts, almost all of them are historically came previous to the regulations and are all historically underparked. So any conversion of commercial to residential, as long as it's off the first floor and stays below 50%, will probably make most of your properties more conforming. And I think that's one thing that's important. All of your neighbors, I mean, you can walk any one of them, look at every one of them. Almost every one of them is underparked. That were fit historically, they were built prior to your regulation. This relieves, I think, and also supports and supplements these types of districts.
No, I think we got it.
Yeah.
I mean, we're now
I'm just
saying the
very good
same
at
thing
repeating myself. I'm
over and
sorry.
over again. Does anyone else have any other questions? Okay, very good. Attorney Rizzio, anything new to add?
I'll wait for rebuttal.
Okay.
You seem to do better there.
Very good. Okay. Does any member of the public wish to be heard? Please, sir. Come on up. Not you.
My name is still Paul Howard, and I am the owner and occupant.
Can you just pull the mic down a little bit? Believe it or not, the microphones actually are as much for us as it is for you guys.
Okay.
Because, yeah, we
Okay.
can't hear.
I am the owner and occupant of 2040 Bronson Road. I abut the property, 1960, Building 1.
Can you point out on the map where your property is located?
Bronson Road and Hill Farm Road.
Got it.
And there is one other residential property immediately behind me on Hill Farm. My neighbor, Mary Ellen Brown, she is with me here tonight as well. I was also part of the group when we opposed the generator going in several years ago. Number of circumstances that when that was delivered, when it went in. It seems a lot of the arguments that were made at the time that we wanted as part of that generator installation are now being used against us. And now everyone's for the sound buffer wall, which was being opposed by the property owner at the time, but that's not what's relevant here. My property looks at this property for 9 months a year when the leaves drop at the end of the season. It's directly out my side yard. I see what's going on there. I think the amendment is very clear about what it states. It says no residential on the ground floor, nothing more than 50%, and it doesn't say multiple building, it says per building. I just feel that we're going to be back here in 4 or 5 years if we give in to the second, third floor for the one building as compensation. They're going to have an obsolete building on their hand with the other one. They're going to be back here looking to put 2 floors of residential in there. 23 years I've been a resident there. I don't want 2 floors of residential over next door. The terraces that are going to be part of the dormer that I looked at look over into my backyard directly, my backyard and my side yard. It's not what I purchased, it's not where I want. I just don't think there's any need for giving the concession to overload one property with more residential than the amendment calls for, and that's basically it. I also had one other question. Was this on any sort of docket? Because I've had a health issue for the last year, and I haven't been able to follow the goings as much, but there have been meetings by members of the neighborhood, particularly in February, where there were 30 families that were interested in about this, and I only received a letter 2 weeks ago, and I didn't see anything on any of the town hall information. My letter actually came from Q&R Associates.
Okay. Well, Attorney Rizzio will address the public notice and the requirements for mailings in rebuttal.
Okay, because I found it unusual that I had not been contacted by anyone at Q&R at any point of the process, but it was they who sent me the letter about this open hearing, so thank you for your time.
Okay. Thanks very much. Any other members of the public?
Good evening. My name is Paul Sobel. I am with the law firm of Green and Gross in Bridgeport. We represent the Greenfield Hill Improvement Society, and I'm speaking on their behalf. One of the issues that I believe exists is whether or not the building is compliant with the zoning regulations. And if the commission finds the building is not compliant with the zoning regulations, then there would be no need to change the zone for this particular property. The reason for the non-compliance would be the dormers. So the building right now is non-compliant height-wise. I think the building has a 40-foot height. The plans, I believe, show the first story at 12 feet, the second story at 12 feet, and the ceiling on the third story at 8 feet. So I think Mr. Rizzio may say something about the bulk not varying, or if you measure the height, you're okay on measuring the height now. Nonetheless, I think when you're dealing with a non-conforming structure, it's not as easy to say that, well, it's 40 feet and we're not going above that, because that would be analogous to, for example, excuse me, having, say, for example, 100 square feet of a building going over a side yard setback. That doesn't entitle a person to take away or make that part of the setback compliant and go over on another 100 square feet. The dormers add structure where there was no structure before, and it's above 30 feet. So that's an issue for the commission to look at. I don't know if you have any questions about that.
So hold on a second. So you're suggesting it's non-conforming because the maximum height allowance is 30 feet and the existing condition is 40?
Correct. And well, it's existing non-conforming.
Right.
So because something is existing non-conforming, that does not entitle the person to push out further non-conformities.
So you're saying the dormer construction in the area above the non-conforming use would be an additional non-conformity that we
Yeah.
can't allow?
Correct.
Would exacerbate the non-conformity.
Does it,
Correct.
does that make it taller, though?
Pardon?
Sobel? I mean, when you say increase the non-conformity, you're saying the non-conformity is due to
That's a good
height,
point.
right? So it's
Yes.
it's a 40-foot building, we can agree to that, I mean, that's on their
Yeah.
plan that they handed us,
Yeah.
and the maximum is 30 feet, and you said the 12.8, that may be 32 or whatever, but
Yes.
whatever it is, they're stipulating they have a 40-foot building.
Yeah, the ceiling heights actually don't matter. It's
Right, they
where
don't-
that,
yeah.
where the line,
It's
crosses the
how they
beam
measure the
or
roof.
whatever, but it's 40 versus 30.
But how does the dormers make it work?
They are pushing out the roof. And so they are creating more structure in a space located more than 30 feet above the base elevation.
Okay.
So there will be additional structure above 30 feet, even though the roof line, yeah, okay.
So it's not an increased nonconformity like we'd usually be if they were taking 40 and making it 44.
Correct.
That's how we usually view an increased nonconformity.
My analogy is, maybe you can visualize it more easily in the case of a side yard setback.
Right.
So if you have a building and the building happens to be 100 square feet over on the side yard, because you have an existing 100 square foot encroachment, that does not entitle you to decrease that encroachment and then go over the setback in another location.
Yeah, or similarly, if you're encroaching in an area, let's say by 10 feet, and it doesn't entitle you to add on another 2 feet onto your building, even though,
Correct.
because you're not going to be further encroaching, but you have, in a way, exacerbated a non-conformity. So we need to look at that.
So that may affect how the commission desires to handle the zone change application. I was going to, if the commission is not going to deny the zone change application, the special permit application, then I would ask that the zone change application, the public hearing be kept open so that the commission might consider with more deliberation the effect of a change of the zoning regulations, as was mentioned, and we would like more time to investigate the effect on the other areas in town that have the NDD designation. Initially there was talk about how the proposed particular site was only a hypothetical, and the application is really being made for a change of zone, text change that affects all of the NDD properties. I went through the zoning map, and I'm not sure if I got them all, but I got a number of them. So it's the balance of the area in this area of Bronson Road. There is Pequot Avenue near the Post Road. There's the southern end of Reef Road. There's Reef Road south of Oldfield Road. There's the intersection of Black Rock Turnpike and Jennings Road. There's Black Rock Turnpike between Moritz Place and Judd Street.
Sorry, excuse me, are you just naming all the neighborhoods?
Okay, so
Because, I mean, I appreciate that, but are any lots in any of those districts that you're aware of have two detached buildings which would be relevant to our analysis here?
I personally am not aware presently, but I haven't made an inspection. In addition to that,
Right.
a person can redevelop their property, they can demolish buildings, and they can build additional buildings and use this regulation to apply to multiple buildings. It is also possible, and I don't know that this is the case, that a present lot or an assemblage can be pieced together where one building is outside of the NDD and another building is in the NDD. And the manner in which the proposed regulation is drawn would allow both of the buildings to be counted for the square footage for the residential that's going inside of the NDD. These are just examples of really not having time to vet the proposed regulation.
Well, and so to that point, what do you mean you haven't had time? I think from what I understood from the applicant, from Attorney Rizzio, you knew that this was kind of in the works, and there was dialogue, there was express, I don't call it a threat, but whatever, that if they went for a variance, that your organization, the organization you represent, would appeal it, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, did you just?
I personally am not aware of that. I'm filling in for my partner, Joel Green. He
All right.
brought his youngest daughter to college, and he's on his way back in a couple of days.
All right. Yeah.
So because, we want to move in an efficient manner. Are you suggesting that you or Mr. Green, if this hearing was held open, would actually do some sort of analysis that would give us a better sense of what the impact may well be across town? Because if I will say, having known Mr. Green's work for during 10 years on this commission, he's usually very thorough. Is that the analysis you would bring to us if we were to hold open the hearing to allow public comment to continue?
Yes, I also have some additional comments.
Okay.
For whatever they're
please
worth on this
continue.
particular.
I mean, the fact that Mr. Green is not available to be here for argument this evening doesn't mean that Mr. Green hasn't been engaged this whole time and had plenty of time to do whatever he was going to do. And Mr. Green, by the way, with all due respect, I like him. He's constantly asking for continuances because he didn't have enough time to get done what we all need to get done by deadlines. So, and we have an obligation, which we will do, to assess the impact of the proposed regulation on various parcels around town as well. So, please continue with your comments.
So I made the comment about the possibility that a lot, whether it's a present lot or it could be an assemblage, can contain a building that's outside the NDD and inside the NDD, and that both the square footage for both buildings would count under the manner in which the present amendment is proposed. We, again, just talked about this particular site. The effect of increased upper floor area on other buildings in other areas zoned for the NDD should be considered. The comment was made about residential use could not be made of 2 floors unless this regulation is allowed. I think there was discussion before that it would be possible if the part of a second floor is devoted to, say, could be a neighborhood office like a lawyer's office or an accountant's office, and you could still meet the 50% for residential use. Example was drawn to Southport Green. I submit that Southport Green is really not applicable. That's a commercial zone. I believe the hotel portion of the use is considered commercial, and it's a large property with a lot of square footage, and it's really not analogous to a neighborhood design district. In closing, I would ask that the commission at least keep the hearing open for the zone change. I think if the hearing is kept open for the zone change, it has to be kept open for the special permit application, because you can't approve the special permit application without the zone change being in place. And again, I believe that the addition of the dormers causes an increase in the nonconformity, or the increase in the violation of the height violation. And if there's no need to rush to adopt the zone change because it would not accomplish the purpose of permitting the development of this particular property, then the commission could have more time to consider whether or not the amendment's really necessary. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Anyone else? Yes?
My name is Mary Ellen Brown. I live at 799 Hill Farm Road. When this application came up, there was a notice sent around the neighborhood that there would be an informal meeting at the market by the developers to find out what our concerns would be if this went to residences. There were about 35 families represented. They all had concerns. We voiced our concerns. One of them was the generator that was very loud, and that they said they would be fixing it. And I just can assume that they're fixing it because the residents that are going to rent there wouldn't want to hear it. They didn't care about all of us having to live with this for the last 7 years. But that's beside the point. So there are 35 families that were very concerned, and we've all been following the planning and zoning agenda, and this came up a couple of times, and the application was withdrawn. And we all thought it was a low point until I got a letter the other day from Attorney Riccio, not from planning and zoning, from an attorney. And as far as I know, only 2 of us got that letter. So there are a lot more people that are opposed to this than I think you're aware of. And I think it was something that this got in while people were napping or on vacation. I just don't know why people aren't here, but
Okay. I mean, I can tell you that it was never filed and withdrawn. This was never on our agenda and then withdrawn previously.
according to the minutes that have been posted on the planning and zoning, it was withdrawn.
Not this application for a...
Yes,
a
it was.
regulation amendment.
It was.
Okay.
Or if you look on the agenda, it was coming up, and it was, I don't know if the application one was drawn, but it said what your wording is, that they weren't going to present it to any of the, they weren't going to present it a few times.
To my
Well,
knowledge,
that's-
it's
well,
not happening.
You know,
But-
the only thing I think she could be referred to is, we always have things come up for recommendation of public hearing.
Right.
So it might have been on an agenda. We don't hear, I mean, our typical process, it comes up there, we decide
Right.
whether we want to hear it, and then, you know, they can explain to you later, there's a whole bunch of notice requirements. These are legal requirements. It's not like we decide what time to do it, so, or who does it. So maybe Mr. Rizzio can answer the thing, but there's a reason why you got a letter from him. There's a reason why certain neighbors, and there's requirements on us to publish this in newspapers. So this is all the notice thing that you probably aren't familiar with, and that's okay, but just to, so I think there's nothing nefarious with our commission going on.
No,
We
I
follow
didn't
like
mean to
the-
suggest that. I was just wondering why I got a letter from the attorney and not from,
Because he's the one that's required to send the notice to
Oh,
the,
he is?
to
Okay.
the, residents within a certain radius. in order to discharge his obligation
Yeah.
to provide you with notice.
Our regulations require him to do it. It actually specifically states that
Okay.
that the applicant has to do it.
Well, I'm not sure if just the two of us, we're the only ones. I'm pretty sure we are because we're the only ones that are here. But I just want to say, you know, when I moved to Fairfield 30 years ago, we bought on Hill Farm 20 years ago. And it was a cute little village, and over the change of the years, and I know that you want to talk about the regulations, but I think the regulations ultimately impact how it all looks. And the market has facade lighting. It's lit up all the time. They have neon lights advertising what they're selling within the market. They have speakers attached to the building and play music on weekends. If you go up to the liquor store, they have neon lights in their window front. The cleaners has a lime green car parked on the lawn, stating that they now will pick up your clothes and deliver it. The real estate office on Bronson has 2 television screens that are flashing the houses that they sell. You know, I'm not opposed to things that have to change, but there's so much visual clutter and excessive lighting in this triangle, and I think that's where a lot of the neighbors are concerned about. But on a personal note, my property abuts this, and I am very much impacted by the dormers that they are going to put. Those dormers will look right into my second floor bedrooms, and they can overlook my deck and my yard. And there are some evergreens there, but they're 10 feet tall, and these buildings are 40 feet tall. So it'll be a long time before that'll be hidden from my standpoint. So it impacts me greatly, and I just wanted to tell you that.
You know, we appreciate your comments.
And if, you know, there are other concerns that people had: lighting, dumpsters, traffic, landscaping, the generator. So I'm hoping that you can rethink this application before you pursue. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for your comments. So, any other members of the public? I don't think there's anybody else here. But Attorney Rizzo, some rebuttal. I'd really appreciate it if you could just take a minute and explain the notice provision and what you did to discharge your obligation.
You folks?
What?
You folks are the office, or the...
It's for the record.
For the record, we took the list of all the properties that were within a certain distance as required by the regulations. We gave the envelopes to the staff, and they're stamped, and the staff sends them out to make sure that we comply with everybody getting notice that's supposed to get notice, and that they're actually sent. So the staff doesn't rely on me saying that we sent them. We actually present staff with the envelopes. They inspect the envelopes, inspect the addresses, and they get sent out.
Right, and so I think it's a 500-foot radius, is that right?
200.
Right.
And I can
so
tell you
this is
that...
This is a regulation. Then. So...
It's for the special permit.
Yeah, is 200 or 200 feet?
I know for a fact that the property owners across the street on Hillside received theirs.
Yeah. No, I
And I know
understand. And
the
this is
adjoining property owners
for
received it.
for their benefit. I mean, we had two adjoining landowners who, you know, were just asking about the notice. That's what the
Correct.
rebuttal is for, is to provide them with the information and so forth. So, do you know approximately how many residents were in that 200-foot radius?
I don't know, maybe around 10, something like that.
10?
I'd have to go through the file, and we gave a list to the town, we gave them the letters, we gave them the envelopes, and they were all sent. I can tell you, everybody that I've spoken to received them, that were the adjoining owners and the clients that I've represented.
Okay. And, I mean, I didn't recall it, but has this application for the regulation amendment and the special permit been filed and withdrawn previously?
No, they may confuse it with a ZBA application that was withdrawn.
Oh, you had a ZBA application
That we
that was
withdrew.
withdrawn. Okay, so that might have been what you were referring to. So what was filed at ZBA?
Is it relevant?
I'm curious as to why.
Sure.
I mean, we talked about
We
the
filed-
variance
we
before.
filed-
You weren't, you know, remiss about, you know, being transparent with us about the opportunity to go for variance. What happened?
No, it's
is
fine.
okay.
I'm just looking at the clock, and I know,
Yeah,
I don't want
worried
you
about
cutting
the
me off at
time.
11, but I'd like to wrap this up tonight.
You will, but
Thank you.
I have specific questions.
Sure, I'd be happy to give you a copy of these ZBA applications. The ZBA application was for a variance to allow more than 50% in one building to be used for residential purposes.
Gotcha. Okay. And that was withdrawn.
That was withdrawn.
I won't ask you why.
Well, I already stated why. But let me also make it clear so that we can wrap this up tonight. I vehemently oppose the keeping this opening for any additional time. We have worked with Attorney Green's office
Hey, you don't have to
since
say any more about that.
February and March. So this application has been vetted. We've had multiple neighborhood meetings which have resulted in changes in the application.
You don't have to say any more about that.
Thank you. All right. I got to figure out something to rebut because I didn't hear any really objections to the regulation amendment.
Well,
But I do want to clear up one thing, and that is the dormers.
Yeah.
And
no, that's
David
important.
Wojtowicz, we've worked with staff on this, and maybe staff also can explain. This discussion came up whether a variance would be needed to increase the dormers, and the issue was we were not increasing the height when you take into account the way the town calculates the percentage of wall versus the percentage of roof, and it doesn't exceed the roof line as measured by what it is.
Okay.
There's a
You need to
whole-
explain, you need to, just, the proposition is fairly discrete, right? The argument is that the building height is currently non-conforming
Correct.
by 10 feet.
Correct.
And that in that area between the permitted height of 30 and 40 feet, there is only so much roof and building occupying that space. And that the proposed site plan would increase the amount of building which occupies the area between the 30-foot allowed and the 40-foot that is proposed. And why is it
It's different. Yeah.
that, and so the question is, why is it that that proposal does not exacerbate a pre-existing nonconformity?
Because of the way height is determined, height and the effects of any additions within a height nonconformity are determined by the town. And David, if you can, David or Mr. Wendt would certainly be able to explain the technical aspect, because this was all discussed. This is not new tonight.
Well,
So go ahead, David, why don't you explain?
if not, then you should be able to tell me why it is.
David Wojtowicz with Jack Franzen's office. I did discuss these dormers with staff, and the dormers, based on being less than 50% of the disturbed roof area that they are on, do not affect the height of the building. So they don't.
that's the answer.
That was a staff review I did with...
The answer to the
Yes,
question
that's-
is, because it's less than 50% of the area, it's not considered to be an exacerbation of a pre-existing nonconformity. And what is the authority for that proposition?
That was with staff review. That's where it came from.
Okay.
I
So
mean, that
is
was
it-
3 months ago, most
we'll-
likely.
We'll
I
have
mean-
to, we'll have to, you know, probe that and,
Yeah.
you know, as we do with staff and get more information
And
on
the
that.
existing building heights are not 40 feet under the current mean level roof. They're approximately 35. So
Well, then
40
your-
feet
then
is the
your-
ridge
then your
height of that
data-
existing building, give or take.
Then
So
your data accumulation is not correct, because the data accumulation page that you filed today says that the height of the building is 40 feet.
that would be approximately to the ridge of the building, approximately.
So is the 50%...
When the buildings were built, we don't know the regulation in which they were built under the definition of height. So we use that larger height number, because we don't know when these buildings were built what the zoning definition of height was. So that's the reason there's that little bit of, but if we use the current definition, it's mean level. I'm just stating that, that's all. I'm not saying...
The data accumulation plan that you filed today is a blow-up of the data accumulation on the site plan that you filed, right? The one that you highlighted, Attorney Rizzio, right?
It's got pink on it.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's the same thing.
right? It's the same thing.
Correct.
So you're telling me that the calculation that you have for the building height in that data accumulation plan is an estimate because you don't know what the
No,
the
it's
regs
to
were
the
at the
ridge
time
line,
of
to the
It's
top of
40
the
feet.
building is 40 feet,
It's
correct.
40 feet.
Correct,
Okay, it's not 35, it's not an estimate.
no,
The height of the building is 40 feet,
correct.
okay?
I'm not arguing.
Okay. So, the answer to the question was, because it's less than 50% of disturbance
Correct.
of that area, okay, then it doesn't affect the nonconformity.
Correct.
Okay. So, my follow-up question is, where does that 50% disturbance standard come from? Is it in our regulations? Is it a practice that you think occurs at TPZ? Is it information that staff gave you, which we need to chase down? Or is it a case, some case law?
I will-
You know, what is the authority for that proposition?
We reviewed it with staff, and that's how that determination was made.
Okay. So other than what staff told you, it's not like there's something else you can point us to.
I can't point to it, but I'm sure Mr. Wendt, when you're in executive session, will be able to explain to you how he came about that
Fair enough.
determination.
And that is the answer to my question. So I appreciate it.
I think it's also been used on other properties, from my understanding, at least the architect, they've used that in other properties throughout the town. So I think it's been the practice and the determination of the town. Different, I will tell you, I know it's definitely different than with setbacks. And in setbacks, when you violate the setback, that's different than determining the actual height and any enlargement of the height.
Yeah, I mean, one way to look at it is that, and frankly, you know, I thought about this before when we were going through the regulation amendment. You know, you were saying, well, gee, if you interpret it this way, it could mean that. If you interpret it this way, it could mean that. So we're going to come in with an amendment to, like, more clearly define it. If there's an interpretation under the regulation that you think you could fit within, why not just argue that interpretation of the regulation rather than come in for an amendment?
Because I believe, and in talking with staff, that when we looked at the regulation and looked at it closely, that I don't believe that the way that it considered a situation where there were multiple buildings.
Okay.
So in one instance, it says a building. In other instance, it doesn't refer to the property. So that was why we said, let's be specific. I don't want to reach and say, this was really meant to go across properties. Let's be definitive.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we made it clear. I've come across it in different districts, but the same 50% regulation with regard to a project that you'll soon see on One Post Road. I've seen it with regard to the Delamar, and the Delamar does have
One Post Road.
there's an office building at on the Berry, that you'll have a building that'll be 100% residential.
Seeking to be 100, right, okay.
Yeah.
So it's not a multi-building situation.
It is going to be a multi-building situation.
Not a neighborhood design business. Jason.
Not a neighborhood design district.
Right, yeah, that's not a neighbor, that's commercial.
Commercial, yeah.
Commercial.
And in the commercial district, you don't have the 14,000 square foot requirement
No.
either, that you would have to contend with.
But we have commercial on the ground floor, which
Correct.
is what,
What was received, they've got a variance to not have commercial on the ground floor, because they were in a flood zone, believe it or not. I mean, totally different
yeah,
situation.
okay, all right.
But all I want to say is that this situation was unique. The strict interpretation, reading of the regulation, we thought it was important to come in with the text amendment so that it was perfectly clear. And I did hear a lot of discussion from the opposition. What I didn't hear was anything with regard to why the problem was an amendment. Because when you look at the amendment accomplishes two things. It reduces the density and intensity of a use on a site, reduces the traffic and the parking requirements on typically what are non-conforming sites, and certainly with regard to this property. I trust that staff would be able to comment as how this impacts other neighborhood design districts. I don't think you will see this situation that would impact, I didn't see any, there may be one multiple tenant property. Typically those multiple building properties are always non-conforming with regard to parking. So I think this is a win-win for the town. I think it gives you the diversity of housing opportunities that you'd like, gets rid of nonconformities, looks to reduce nonconformities, and provides what has become very popular. Living downtown, living in a neighborhood, walkability. You look at every apartment or every real estate guide, and there's always a walkability rating. Walkability to things is what this town is stressed and that we'd like to see. It's what you talked about even seeing in the brick walk. I tell you, I live downtown and it's fantastic. This gives the people in the neighborhood to live in that neighborhood, patronize the community shops, and all of the commercial developments on either side of this support this. It's not like they're not looking to reduce the traffic, and it's because, well, like I said, it gets people to live there full time. They go to the restaurants, they'll go to the market, they'll hopefully work out, they'll hopefully do yoga, and all of that
Get their clothes cleaned.
within
and also pick
walking
up some
distance.
alcohol on the way. Yeah, no,
But in the end,
Yeah.
I didn't, as far as rebuttal, I don't know that there's anything for me to rebut from a text amendment perspective. I will tell you that we are willing to accept the condition that we do put a sound barrier around the generator.
Yeah.
And
What about the dormers?
what about the dormers?
Yeah, I mean, that those are they're not required, are they?
You are, when you have a bedroom, you've got to have window space.
And there's, without the dormers, there's no possibility of putting a window in the second floor?
On a third floor.
The third floor, sorry, yeah. No, it's the roof line as it, yeah.
It becomes 3 stories
By having the dormer. So there's no opportunity to have windows in the roof line without, and I don't know the answer to the question, so I'm asking in the abstract. But if you couldn't build the dormers, you couldn't do the third floor?
I don't know that. I will tell you that part of it, I could tell you part of it was architectural, and certainly the building looks a lot better from a architectural standpoint. You're going to have windows, whether they're a dormer or they're into the roof line. Somebody's going to be looking out. So
No, of course. But
we're not changing the effect on any neighboring properties because I can tell you, you have to have a window.
That's not the reason I'm asking.
Okay.
The reason I'm asking is because if I do the research and I find that an increase in the disturbance between the area between 30 and 40 feet results in an exacerbation of a pre-existing nonconformity, then you can't do that, even if I grant the regulation amendment, okay? So I'm asking the question, if that's the case, can you not put windows in the third floor? I don't know the answer to that.
I think what we would be able to do is we would be able to, rather than have the dormers go out, you'd probably be able to recess them in so that if the commission found that as was an issue, they could condition their approval on the dormers being removed and that there be no expansion of the roof.
I don't know the answer to the question.
But what I'm saying is if the
That's why I'm
commission was not comfortable with staff's interpretation, we would certainly not object to a condition that would require installation of windows without expanding the roof line. I don't think it accomplishes anything from a
No, I don't think so, but anyway.
And I frankly, I really don't think it's an issue. As I said, I've given you the pictures. Drive by the site. I hope you drive by the site. You go across the site, and you will see how well landscaped and maturely landscaped this property is.
Yeah, no, I understand. Very good. Does anyone else? I've asked more than my fair share of questions here in the rebuttal. Does anybody else have any questions? So.
Mr. Kennelly, please, nothing for me tonight. You're killing me.
No, we're all good.
Chairman, I would respectfully request this commission grant both applications.
Of course.
We believe they're consistent with your plan of conservation development and consistent with your regulations. I thank you for your time and respectfully request that you close this public hearing tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll close the public hearing on this item, and I'll adjourn the meeting.